Welcome. I hope you're all well. This is the BushWhisperer coming at you from the beautiful Cape Town, southern tip of Africa. Come to talk to you today about something which is very close to my heart, something which is rather profoundly important, really. It's about masturbation, it's about sexuality, and it's about how the media has hijacked our minds, how it has taken control of our society, how it has brought us to the brink in what can only be termed as something diabolical. This isn't going to be such a long broadcast. It's going to be a much shorter one. Though what is going to be discussed here is of phenomenal importance. I can't even begin to tell you how fundamentally important this is. It is essentially the bottom line, really, when we're talking about this. And to start off with, I will say, welcome to all of you that are going to be here, that are arriving. And to those of you that are watching the recording, I hope you can enjoy the show. A few of the people that were meant to be here are a bit late, so I'm still waiting for some of the people to arrive. Unfortunately, there have been a number of emergencies. People's dogs have been injured, their cars have had problems with MOTs. It's been one thing after another. Somebody had to cancel last minute as well. But we're going to start the show regardless. There are going to be people popping in as we move along. So to begin with, I'd like to start with talking about exactly how mainstream pornography really is and how much of a fundamental problem it actually has become in this day and age, and just how much of an impact it has on our lives, how much of an impact it has on the way in which we are able to understand ourselves. Because the nature of sexuality isn't quite what it seems to be, if we're going to call it what it is. And unfortunately, we've reached this point in life where the situation has become beyond diabolical, because it's now inflicted upon children. And as we well know, I mean, recently there was a porn star from Japan, and people are making jokes out of it, and it is really quite sadly funny. The humor is sad, but it's relevant and it's true. It needs to be considered for what it is. A Japanese porn star died from drowning in somebody else's semen. A group of men's semen. She didn't even know whose semen she drowned in. And it just gives you an idea of how competitive the porn arena is in order for these people to be able to make a living, if you can call that a living, out of this ridiculous show. And I mean, this is something that people laugh about because it is laughable. Okay, she chose her lifestyle. She chose what she was doing. But what her family is supposed to think about this? And what did her family even know that she was doing what she was doing? So when we consider the bigger picture, we can also take a look at the fact that sex trafficking is very much tethered to the pornography. It's very much tethered to these big companies that are making a lot of money out of exploiting women that are financially below the level of safety, and so are desperate to make easy money because it's a way out of poverty. It's a way out of a challenging situation for them. And it's something that they have a skill set for, if you can call that a skill set. Don't even know how to approach this topic, to be honest with you. Welcome. We've got Moonfeather, we've got Necrosized. Welcome to you guys. I hope you guys are well. I hope you guys are having a great day, by the way. So what did Moonfeather not get her link? Well, let me carry on. Let me carry on talking. So basically, the situation has reached a point where, and welcome, Carlisle. How are you doing, my brother? And I'd like you to get to say hello before I go ranting off on my own.
Love, peace, and power, brother. Thank you for this stage. By all means, please continue.
Well, I was just going to preface by saying that I think Moonfeather hasn't got her link yet. I tried to send it over the WhatsApp, but I don't think it's sent on my phone. So I will continue by talking while I'm sending Moonfeather the link. What has become mainstream is basically that there are people being involved in sex trafficking, right? And the sex trafficking industry is like really tethered to the pornography in a very sad and very methodical way. So many of the people that are ending up in pornography are not necessarily choosing to end up into pornography themselves. And that link didn't go because my phone didn't send it. Okay, I've sent it now. So, yep, it's actually arrived. Oh, it's this handset. The battery was almost flat. I didn't realize it had gone onto airplane mode. Why does it do that? It does it. Anyway, she's got it now. There we go. Moonfeather's got the link. So yeah, basically what's happening is children are being pushed into porn. Pimps are getting hold of children on the street, homeless kids. They're pushing them into prostitution. And because pornography is so mainstream, prostitution is becoming so mainstream. Everything's becoming so accepted and acceptable these days that one can't even begin to understand or fathom the insanity of the world that we're living in, because it truly is. It's a bit of a sad show. It's a sad show. And so what you can say in honesty, if you were to look at the situation, is it's basically a bunch of gangsters that are running the industry by the seams of it. And the things that are happening these days that pass for a sense of normality, it's beyond disgusting. So what I wanted to bring up was, firstly, how prevalent it is, how mainstream it is, how accepted and acceptable it is, and how disgusting it is. Secondly, what does it do to the energy body? This is something else I'd like us to address in this discussion. How does it affect your kundalini? How does it affect your telomeres? How does it affect self-image for a man? Because generally speaking, when men watch porn, they often masturbate. What does masturbation do for oneself? What is the story about spilling one's seed on the earth? Why should we not be doing it? How does it affect our longevity? I mean, as a man, you know, when you ejaculate, you don't gain energy. In fact, that would be an understatement. So what is the effects of mindlessly ejaculating without love, without activating the correct emotional channels to be open? And how does this affect our spiritual bodies? What kind of spiritual entities are we attracting towards ourselves when we're entering into a sexual state of consciousness, which is a highly energized state of being? But love and care, which should be a part of sex. You should be making love to a woman. There should be a sense of care, and you should be feeling the energy of the woman, and you should be connecting with the woman. Sorry, I'm just sending Moonfeather. Just sent Moonfeather a message. Yeah, so the way in which the body is affected, the way in which our consciousness is affected, the way in which our self-esteem is affected. Because when a man ejaculates and he's not in a state of love and commitment and energetic communion with a woman, it has really negative effects on self-esteem, for example. And as men, you'll have noticed that porn doesn't do you any good. It causes us to objectify women, and it brings out the worst in people's relationships. And often women feel sort of pressured into this because they think it's what the men want. And they think that's what they got to do to keep their men. They think they're going to be ridiculed if they don't agree to watching porn with their man or trying out some of these moves that they've seen on the porn, and that they shouldn't tell their men not to watch porn. I've seen psychologists going online telling the world that it's healthy to watch porn, it's healthy to masturbate. This is like the mental illness being spread by people with certificates that have no business studying or practicing psychology, in my opinion. But that's enough of me for now. I'd love to hear Kalal, and I'd love to hear what other people have to say. And so I'll leave it with you, Kalal.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Kalal is really an amazing decoder. I haven't actually introduced him properly. You've probably seen him if you've been here on the show before. Kalal is something else. He's a decoder. He's a numerologist. He's an occultist. He studied and practiced all sorts of schools of thinking. He's a philosopher in his own right. And he's an ex-priest, if I've got that right, or a pastor. And he was trained in pastoral school. So he's really got a well-grounded base from various different angles towards tackling the occult and the esoteric, especially this particular issue. But I'm going to hand the mic to you before I carry on.
Thank you for that, brother. I greatly appreciate that. I didn't actually make it to clergy status. Thankfully, I walked away before I got to that point. I got in too much trouble, which is saying a lot, especially when it comes to this topic that you have marvelously brought up. Masturbation and porn have become staples in culture today. We can argue whether or not they have always been that. There's always been, as long as we've had cave paintings, there's been pornographic material. We could argue, right? Whether it be the Kama Sutra or some other ancient texts, but this was not for personal gratification. It was not for widespread, just anybody just willy nilly. Um, when you look at porn specifically, there's so many things connected to it. I remember when I was maybe 18 or 19, when I started doing some really serious sex studies, because I had lost twins and I didn't want to experience that pain again. So that meant that self-control had to become a very, very real thing, very tempered. When you look into porn, there's so many things connected to it. How does porn make so much money? But it's 9 times out of 10, you can go to, hundreds of thousands of websites and it's free. Like that should kind of be a red flag. When we look at child sex trafficking, when we look at prostitution, when we look at how certain countries operate when it comes to what prostitutes, men or women, are allowed to do, is very, very telling. When you look at the spread of disease, especially among our youth today, is worse than any of these fires that we know are currently going on in the realm. I don't know where to start first. There's a lot of mental illness, and it's being propagated as healthy behavior.
Welcome, Surya. Soraya, sorry, I called you Surya, but it sounds like Surya. It sounds like the name of the solar disc in Vedic, Soraya, Surya. I didn't even make that connection before, which is incredible. I normally make these connections instantly. But so much love. We've got Soraya here. She's an artist, poetess, and she practices all forms of spiritual devotion and meditation and esoteric truths. She's got a channel as well. She shares a lot of really wonderful information, as does Kalal. We'll have to link up their channels. You'll find them on a link tree as well. But we will give her a chance to let you know where her channels are to be found. But without ado, I'd like her to get an opportunity to say hello and just a word. Moonfeather's going to be with us. She's just having a little bit of technical trouble with her system, with her audio jacks. I had that last week. It's a nightmare. So she'll be with us soon. But for now, Soraya, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Funny connection that you made earlier. Do you hear me?
Most definitely.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, my mother named me after the Persian queen. She was 5 when she heard on the radio something being said about it. So she heard that name and she said, when I'm big, I'm going to call my first daughter that. So she had me, and she gave me the name. And I have 3 channels now.
So I'd like to continue while we all getting sort of ready and steady and getting into the flow of things. What I've also come to talk about is Kundalini, and it's interesting. Surya comes up. It's really quite apt, really. Surya. Surya, the sun, is the channel through which all the life force and the prana comes to our bodies, and the prana enters into our consciousness, enters in through the head, enters in through the body, and it energizes all the chakras. And so you can think of Surya as being the dispensator of pranic life force. I have got to let that little doggy in. He's going to stand and scratch at the door. He's going to. So give me a moment.
He's gonna pile it off. He's going to sand it.
So yeah. So as I was saying, the life force, the prana, comes in through our gates and descends into our physical form, chakra by chakra, filling all the essences with the vibrational requirements for each aspect of consciousness, which is manifesting an aspect of the body. And so this kundalini is essentially what we can term as the fundamental glue through which consciousness and physicality are melded into a synergy of symmetry that reflects as above, so below, in order for the consciousness field to be able to manifest on the physical plane. Kundalini is the key. Now, when a man is ejaculating, it's quite serious. A man is literally losing his etheric force. He's literally losing soul essence. The essence of soul that glues consciousness to the physical form is what the sacrifice that a man makes when he impregnates a woman is great. It takes time off his life. It shortens a man's life, literally. Now, women, okay, here's probably a good place to start. What are the effects on the physical body and the consciousness? So men will lose prana, they will lose essence, they will lose power, they will lose spiritual power, they will lose physical power. They will lose time. The telomeres will get shorter faster. Yeah, telomeres get shorter faster, which means you age faster. The consciousness will grow dull. Senility is what a man will look forward to. But first, impotency. So first, the man will become impotent because he will run out of juice, because there literally is a finite amount of juice in the system. This is why Taoist Tantra and Taoist forms of energy work is so focused on the males being able to capture and secure their chin, their sexual energies, being able to keep the chi, keep it, not lose it, recycle it through the microcosmic orbit and maintain the chi in the form, meld it with the chi and allow it to settle in the physical body and not actually ejaculate, not lose any of the energy. And it's very much a similar routine for tantric practice if you're coming from the Vedic schools. So the loss of the semen, the seminal fluid, is the loss of chi, is the loss of life force, is the loss of prana, effectively. And it shortens a man's life. It also makes his intelligence dull. It slows down the rate of thinking potential. It causes the male's metabolism to slow down. It raises your heartbeat. Raising the heartbeat and slowing the metabolism. I want you to think of what a weird combination of events those are. Because it means that the energy, life force is being depleted from the body way faster than normal. Because the metabolism slows down, there's less energy available. Also, the body wants to put on weight. Also, it's going to create other stresses and pressures on the tissues. And the heartbeat's wanting to go faster, so it's going to weaken the heart as well. And put stress on the circulatory system, blood pressure, everything. Women, on the other hand, they don't suffer those fates. Women, energetically, if a woman ejaculates too much and if a woman practices masturbation more than she should, well, how much should a woman practice masturbation? That's another question, because when a woman opens herself sexually, she's opening herself up to receive something inside of herself. Normally it's a man producing semen. And there should be a bond of love, which is a bond of security and a bond of safety for the woman to open herself up to. So when a woman's opening herself up, she can receive other entities to come inside of her more easily. So possession is a very real possibility, more of a real possibility for women than for men. Although men will have the entities feeding off of their life force and weakening them, sending them to their graves, women will more likely get possessed by the entities, and the entities will use them to do bad things, you see. So with women, it's more likely to be a mental dilemma. They can become unstable mentally and emotionally. can become downright delusional or psychotic. So women can suffer mental illnesses and psychosis and all sorts of other issues and become hyperactive and hyper emotional. And when a woman has an orgasm, she speeds up her metabolism and she speeds up her heart rate. So there's more life force being generated. It's not particularly good for women because of the lack of safety and the lack of love and the lack of what should be a harmonious vibrational field between a man and a woman in order for something which is a divine act of creation to take place so that children can be brought into being. So women and men both suffer physiologically from this act. So I'm going to leave it at that for a moment and see who else has something they want to say.
Well, yeah, I had something to bring in because when you mentioned Kundalini, I saw the video clip of Iniko in front of me, and if I don't know if you've seen it, but in the end there's a scene where two streams of light intertwine together, they swirl up. That looks just like a Kundalini beam, but only you don't see it in real life, but you can feel it. But that was very beautiful to see because it was like it was shooting up and it came down, causing this very big, massive beam, beam of light being shown. You have yes, you switched off your. You were saying something, but you muted yourself.
I'm so sorry if I derailed your train of thought. I was just moving my camera to be in a better position for the light, for my eyes. But it's interesting what you were saying. I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, if you see the video clip, you really get what I mean.
I do actually understand. And do let me know how is my audio? Is my audio working out all right, or is there a problem?
Yes, it's good now because when you were moving your camera, you switched off your audio and you were saying something and then I could not hear you. But when you switched it back on, I could.
Please do forgive me. And Kalal, brother, you're still with us? Yes?
Yes, indeed.
I'd love to hear what you think.
There's so much here. You've already said such a wonderful mouthful. When we try to get to the bottom of something, when we try to correct behavior, there's a certain amount of revelation that has to be had. There's a certain amount of realizing what we've allowed seemingly to go on to be had. And the behavior I see today, children are not as welcomed as they have been in previous generations, as previous decades, right? The Roe versus Wade reversal here in the States did a lot, but it didn't do nearly enough, and we can't trust that kind of thing to the governments of the world. It's going to have to reach a point where we, the people, decide to do something. When it comes to abortion, when it comes to children in the system and CPS, a lot of these children grow up to be porn stars. For as taboo as that topic or that genre or that area may be, we have to research these people in order to understand why they interact the way they do, why they've chosen these professions, why we tend to focus on the actors and the actresses as opposed to the directors and the financiers. There's I don't want to misspeak the name, but I know there's a porn company that actually owns some of the rights to the Bible, which was, and I'm not sure which Bible. I'm not sure if it's the Gideon. I know it's not the King James, but the King James is just as vile because it's owned by the British Crown. And the British Crown, like you notice when it comes to some of these big movies, some of the biggest productions you'll ever come across in porn is when they do a parody of something. And by parody, I mean like Spider-Man, Avengers, these superheroes, Superman, Wonder Woman. You'll notice when they do these parodies, they have full permission from their parent companies. Now listen to the words I said, from their parent companies. Now, if I go out here and I draw something that looks too close to Superman, I'm getting sued within an inch of my life. Why is it when it comes to porn, certain laws are relaxed? When it's okay to make money, when it's okay for spreading of sexual and mental illness. These are questions we have to ask, as opposed to just, oh, they do porn, let's shun that, not pay any attention to it. I'm not telling people to go buy it. I'm just saying pay attention to what they're doing, because it's been a totalitarian tiptoe that is now in a full sprint.
Those are very good points that you're bringing up, Kalal. The fact that this is legal and that people are getting away with this says a lot. And it's a bit despicable, if you get right down to it, in realistic terms, is the fact that this is allowed is a little bit scary. And it does give us an insight into the nature of our governance and just exactly what the agendas are. The fact that public health and safety is, as you say, disregarded, and religious rights are, well, I mean, it's a joke that any Bible or any religious document can be owned. When you think about it, like, who owns the rights to the Bible? I never actually even considered that as a reality, that there is such a thing. But I suppose in this day and age, everything's got to be owned and financialized to some degree. And I think money is really what it comes back down to. In my opinion, porn is a facade for generating money, basically to keep people. You see, if porn is mainstream as it is, and it's legal and it's allowed, and by porn, I'm not just talking about official porn. I'm talking about advertisements where there's a half-naked woman on the car with a hosepipe selling a car. That might not be seen as porn, but in the 50s, it was seen as porn because they had their heads far more screwed on, in my opinion, back in the old days. They really had values. Family values mattered. And people were thinking about the family unit. They were thinking about the way it would affect children. And look at how it has affected the children. Look at how it's affected us, the development of young teenage boys. It's despicable what children are being exposed to on the web. And to take that to the point of, if they can break up families, which porn is an instrument of breaking up families, let's call it what it is. I mean, relationships are effectively under attack. And somebody brought up a very good point that porn sites are portals run by small hat demons. I like the small hat demons part. The small hat part is quite cool. It's quite funky. But this is not a joke. This is not something to just be ha ha ha. It's funny. It is funny. It's funny because it's true. The funniest jokes in life are generally truest jokes. And I do believe that there are these entities that are gaining a lot of resource from the pornography industry. And so there's a lot of possession happening with both the porn stars, which is why drugs are often a part and parcel of the fare for porn stars. They take drugs and they make porn, right? And it's part of the industry to give them drugs and to ensure that they've got the drugs to be able to do their job. What a concept. And so cocaine and other drugs are part of the cost, So we've got this industry which is basically opening women up to demonic possession, opening men up to becoming idiots, because men become idiots when they wank. There's a reason why we call men wankers, right? You ever call anyone a wanker? Have you thought about why you're calling him a wanker? Because when men masturbate, they become wankers, and they start acting out the way you would, when you call someone that. In Britain, it's a very typical term. And but I get trouble for saying this word, but it is what it is. It's what it is. So unfortunately, we've got this delusional mental structure in this world where people are being driven towards porn. You can't even avoid it. You click your browser and it comes at you. And as men, we are very much vulnerable to beautiful sexual women, right? It's what makes a man, is that you see a woman and you enjoy the beauty of a feminine form, but you're not supposed to be enjoying random naked beautiful women all the time, because it's not really natural, in a sexual context. It's one thing to look at a woman that's half naked on the beach and she's going for a swim, but she's not sexually looking at you with like, oh, come on, baby, you and me. So there's a lot of this in advertising. There's a lot of this in films in Hollywood, and sex is being sold to us wholesale. And I think it's broken a lot of relationships. It's caused a lot of men to become sexually dysfunctional, and the sexual dysfunction of men has thus produced in the relationship serious problems. So the relationships can't make it. And so the women become insecure because they can't live up to the expectations of the porn star, right? Because they go and find young little girls who are very attractive to be the porn star. Well, I don't know, maybe not, but they try to. So they're really putting a lot of pressure on the man. They're putting a lot of pressure on the woman. And so the relationships end up breaking. And when the relationship breaks, then what is left? Then people have nothing in their lives of value. So then it's, what car do you drive? Where do you live? What kind of clothes do you wear? How cool are you? What friends do you have? What social circle are you in? And these start to become more important, as they have become more important as we've progressed. In the last 30, 40 years, this has become far more important than what it used to be. In the past, it was more about the family structure, and families are becoming fractured. Children are unable to relate to their parents. There's always been a bit of an issue, but it seems like the division is growing bigger, and we can't just blame it on technology. We've really got to look at what's going on here. There's something quite fundamental. There's something quite toxic happening. And like somebody rightfully pointed out, there's just, there's Eleanor. Hello, Eleanor. And right she is, she's pointing out here how the drugs is such a big part, and the addictions that come with it. And the biggest pedism, gonna start calling people wankers. Yes, well, unfortunately, like most men are that. That's the sad thing, because masturbation has been turned into a normality, and I it's quite heartbreaking when you really get right down to it, to understand that the men are doing it because they want to feel good, because they actually want to feel the feminine energy. Men want to feel sex so they can connect with the divine feminine, and women want to feel sex so they can connect with the divine masculine. But the divine is being taken out of sex. It's been turned into a road show. And by road show, we mean like roadkill show. And we haven't even touched snuff porn yet. And that's a whole nother story. Carlisle, did you want to say something?
Can you still hear me okay? Okay, excellent. I'm sorry, my sound went in and out for a second. There's I don't know where to land. There's so much there. It is hard to kind of get to the meat of it, because there's so many religious aspects, right? Depending on where people come from. There's so many culture aspects and societal aspects, and then of course law, right? A lot of when I practiced Islam, something that I had a large problem with, which eventually led me to leave it, was the realization that Prophet Muhammad married a 6-year-old and then consummated the marriage supposedly when she was 9. Now, there are many esoteric explanations for that, but my problem with that is many people don't delve into the esoteric. People always tend to rely on the exoteric, meaning the outside. So meaning the more literal, sense, and that is being enacted worldwide. Here in the West, you have a consistent push to lower the age of consent. And not once have I ever seen, and I don't expect them to, but not once have I ever seen anyone question the mainstream media in his face about why that is. Why is there this, this consistent push to try to lower the age of consent? It's about energy harvesting, and it's about trying to spread this filth. And evil only flourishes when good men do nothing. So conversations like this are very much needed and important. They're imperative. If we are at all serious about increasing the quality of life for not just ourselves, but what we like to call a community, these are the kind of conversations we're going to have, and we're going to have more of, because sex sells, and it sells for a reason, like Moonfeather said in the chat. Well, it only sells because that energy is being misappropriated. So how do we begin to correct that? Well, we have to understand first what it's meant for. So like the story you alluded to towards the beginning, when it comes to, and I forget exactly who it was, the brother of someone, the brother of someone in the Bible died. And, the way the rule is, you had to marry the sister. But instead of impregnating the sister or planting the seed in her womb, he spilled it on the ground and God killed him. And people, I know myself included, I used to take that very literal, but that's not at all what it means. It's telling you, if you don't use this energy for what it was intended for, it can kill you. It, in fact, will kill you. And I don't know, because as far as the porn industry goes, there's a lot of spin doctoring going on when it comes to that. A lot of porn stars will be suicided. A lot of porn stars will have accidents. And this is again why I say we have to study all aspects of this so we can begin to truly discern what's going on, see the actual big picture.
I'd love to welcome Stein. Stein Fawkes has arrived.
Yes.
He's a pagan, magician,
Peace, Stein.
occultist,
Yo, good to be here.
philosopher, and specializes in Norse mythology. And obviously he's a father, right? So this is very real for them. This is a conversation that's going to be touch. I'm a father, Kalal's a father, Surya's a mother, Stein's a father. So we can all feel this very viscerally because we've got kids. But I'm going to say hello and welcome.
Thank you. Glad I could still join. Hope you can all hear me well. I'm not at home at the moment, as you can see by the actual background instead of just living room. But yeah, this is a topic close to my heart. Being a father of two young kids, and with all the temptations in this world and how easy the access gets to it. And as Kalal pointed out when I joined, that the powers that be, so to speak, keep lowering the age of consent, which, being a father of two young kids, myself, my oldest, my daughter being 8 years old, I am not okay with that. And then of course there is the difference between things being legal and things being lawful and rightful and all. And just because it's legal doesn't mean it's lawful. Just because it's legal doesn't mean it's okay. I haven't caught anything of the stream yet. I just had dinner with my my parents and my sister. But the movie that recently came out, what was it again that caused such a upheaval about child trafficking and human trafficking? Like, it's funny how a topic like that in a Hollywood movie, which is semi fictionalized, can cause such a upheaval that the theaters try to have people not watch it by turning off the air conditioning, or just blatantly tell people like, oh yeah, there is no showing today of that movie while it's clearly on the bill. So there is a, you know, I know it's a heavy topic, and you know, Hollywood making a movie about it is really something special, because that, like, pretty much doesn't happen. Not unless there's some alternative agenda going on. But I guess that movie is so serious to the point that we are not supposed to watch it, because it exposes so much. Even though it's the story of a ex-CIA agent, which, you know, of course, does have to be taken with a grain of salt. You know, the three-letter agencies are not to be trusted, of course. But yeah, just, you know, all of it, it's a pretty serious topic, and frankly, I'm happy that you brought all these people together to actually talk about it, and the implications of it, not just the kitty thing, but also the self-love thing, which gets promoted more and more. Like, actual intimacy is now taboo as well, is now considered wrong as well. Even between two consenting adults, it's not something that you're supposed to do. Not men on women, like the healthy. Everything else is perfectly fine. So yeah, thank you for hosting this roundtable, and it's a topic that seriously needs some discussing. So to have all these brilliant minds together, I'm sure I'm sure the YouTube algorithm is not going to be happy with us. Let's just put it that way.
They never are. The movie you're talking about is The Sound of Freedom. And
That's the one. Yeah.
The Sound of Freedom is a very interesting case, because what you pointed out is exactly what I was speaking about earlier when it comes to, you know, truly looking into something. Because the cover story for that movie is, you know, it's a semi autobiographical story about an ex-CIA agent.
Yeah.
Which is very telling, because the CIA, you don't really get to leave the CIA and live to talk about it unless they allow it, right?
Yeah.
Not only that, but the movie's main financier is a world-renowned pedophile, and that has hardly come into question. On top of the fact that the movie was actually written in 2016 and filmed in 2017 and 18, right when Disney was going through the Fox acquisition. So it seemingly got lost in the shuffle, but that wasn't the case. That was the entire reason for the shuffle. And this is why you see Disney going through what it's going through right now, because they have not been able to be successful in anything that they have tried to do for the last roughly year. And that is going to continue. Disney Plus is looking to be sold. All of Disney as a whole is looking to be sold to Apple. And I think we've already talking about the symbology of the apple and where that comes from, right?
Hmm.
So we're able to kind of tie some of these things together because we only need to pay attention in order to recognize what is already happening.
Yeah. Like, isn't Disney with all their latest projects, didn't they lose like 900 million or something? Like, they're bleeding cash at the moment.
Yes, indeed. It's I think it's a beautiful thing because when you try to monopolize so many different kinds of, let's just say, mythology under
Mm.
one umbrella, and then you try to, run the cookie cutter Twinkie factory process of just creating whatever because they'll buy it. Well, now they see that that is not the case whatsoever. So people are paying more attention. You have people like um, Tom Holland, who plays the latest iteration of Spider-Man, speaking against Hollywood, talking about how bad Disney practices are. I want people to look at um, the director's commentary and the actor's commentary of movies like Spider-Man Far From Home, or I'm sorry, Spider-Man No Way Home, and understand what they actually had to do in order to get three Spider-Men who had all been abused to come back to the fold. I want you to look at the movies that each Spider-Man made after their Spider-Man movie. After, not before. And they're all very similar to Will Smith's very first movie, right? That's just a little bit of homework for some people.
Will Smith in his debut movie, like, wasn't the first scene of him getting caught with another man?
Well, that was I'm not I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I've never seen that movie. The movie you were talking about is 6 Degrees of Separation. Will Smith's very first movie, but I've never watched it because I had absolutely no desire to watch it. But
No.
throughout that movie, he was making a living as a homosexual gigolo who was essentially robbing his one night stands or his boyfriend.
Yeah. It's funny how many like gigolo movies there actually are. The most famous one being, of course, with Rob. Is that Rob Schneider? Um, Deuce Bigelow, Deuce Bigelow, European Gigolo, and all of that. Like, really, you know, with the power of hindsight and all the knowledge that I have gained since, like, normalizing this kind of behavior, like, oh yeah, it's just a job. It's just something that he does. Like, doesn't matter if it's like, and it was so weird as well. I remember, I don't want to get too graphic, because I don't want to um, have Franklin's channel deleted just by saying these things. That'll be a damn shame. But oh god, I believe it was a woman even who had male genitalia, but like where her nose is. So her sneezing is, like the kind of sneezing that male genitalia do, if you catch my drift. And it's so weird. And like, that's another thing, especially in Hollywood. Sex is either very loose, like just, oh yeah, whoever, doesn't matter, or it's portrayed in such a manner that is very derogatory, or very, like, just very weird, like very abnormal. Like, it's one or the other. It's never in a healthy relationships. Like there are 2 movies, even with 2 different couples, about friends with benefits. I believe one is actually called Friends with Benefits, and the other is No Strings Attached.
Yeah,
Justin Timberlake, Mila Kunis, Natalie Portman, and Ashton Kutcher, like 4 very prominent names. Of course, especially Justin Timberlake. But normalizing just casual sex, like literally no strings attached, just friends with benefits, no love is involved, no feeling other than the, just physical feeling, physical pleasure is involved. And that's normal. That's something that, every guy has, that every girl, every woman should do. Yeah, it can never be healthy.
Is my sound okay, by the way, when I talk like this?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes.
I love what you've brought there, friends with benefits. It's so much a part of society. It's so much a part of the disease. And we should be calling this a disease because it's what it is. Alcoholism is a disease, and pornography is a disease that people get addicted to that wrecks lives. I've had a lot of clients come to me and their lives have been wrecked by pornography. Women that have had, like, marriages wrecked because their guys started getting obsessed with pornography, and it leads you down a road where you do things you probably wouldn't normally do because people are, if you watch something happening on a big screen and it becomes normal and commonplace, you're more likely to go and do it in your life. We're all like that. We're all
Yeah.
sort of somehow regulated by the group in some way. And I think it's a natural part of life, to look at our peers and to go, well, if this is the norm, when in Rome, do as Romans do. So this friends with friends, benefit friends, whatever you want to call it, is really, I think, one of the biggest problems, because when a man and a woman have sex, okay, I remember, and I'm going to get into something here which is touching on the divine. When my ex-wife and myself used to make love, we used to see this little wheel turning above us, and these, like, these beings would rock up like souls. They'd all be like looking in, like it's like rolling dice. Like, are any of us going to get a chance to come in here? And it was a little bit overwhelming, because you're not alone. You're making love, and you're noticing that you're being watched from above by a whole lot of beings, and they're all looking for an opportunity to jump inside her, as a baby to be born. And so, what is happening on the spiritual plane when friends with benefits are just having casual sex? They're basically opening this portal, which is a divine portal through which a soul can travel into a body. Only there's no serious contenders coming for the journey into physicality, because the contenders know that there's going to be an abortion at best, right? Or something else equally bad. And abortions is something we need to touch on, I think, because of friends with benefits, abortions have become normal place, to the point where so many teenage girls just go and have an abortion. Like, it's just normal. And it's shocking. I've had so many of my friends having their lives ruined because they've had abortions, because they have to live with the consequences emotionally. Oh, wow. I can't believe I didn't see this. Sorry, I have got to. Moonfeather's, yeah. I'm so sorry, Moonfeather. I only just saw that you were in the room. But I'd love to
Peace.
hear what you have to say. And I'm going to drop the ball with abortions for now and say, welcome, Moonfeather. She's a mystic. She's a clairvoyant. She's a archetypal student. She does the tarot, works with these kind of modalities, as well as just very intuitive, very telepathic. Moonfeather, welcome.
Peace and blessings to everyone. Thank you so much, Franklin. I just honestly, I just got on. The conversation is on fire. I had to jump in real quick, even if I have to jump back out and start working again, because you guys are touching on a lot of amazing things. And it's crazy because it's always the energy and spirit reveals itself and then it manifests, right? So earlier this week I came across a she's a medium too. You know, I was just listening to her and she said something very that really stood out to me. She said, the chosen, quote unquote, the chosen are not out here having sex or dating. And I kind of had to think about that, right? So, because we're talking about, you know, we're talking about porn, we're talking about masturbation, we're talking about giving away our energy in a manner where it's robbing us, right? The sexual energy, which is super powerful, super magical, and we're not taught this. At least in my culture, me growing up, we weren't taught this. We were about the culture coming up, you know, in my 20s or teen, you know, like 19, 20, around there. We're taught, hey, you know, it's okay if, you know, you watch porn, or if a guy watches porn, or if your boyfriend, just go along with it and stuff like that. But it never felt right to me. But I flowed with it, you know, because it's like, well, everybody else is doing it. You know, I had no one talking to me about real deep spiritual things. Not my parents, not a mentor, nothing. So you grow up with this, and this is another part of the healing that that people have to do now. So then when I heard this medium say that, that spirit just pulling you out of situations that, you know, you might not be healed, or you're just not or you just might not get matched up properly just yet with, you know, with a partner, to be able to, you know, to be able to you know, join together in a way where you express each other correctly, you know, and that energy is given and received correctly, you know. And something that you guys were mentioning about the mouse channel, I don't want to say the name too much because I don't want Franklin's channel to get pinged. But the mouse channel, you brought up something, and you were talking about Kala was talking about Spider-Man and all of which, by the way, he touched on Tom Holland, right? And then now Tom Holland just made a super gay movie. You know, he's a home. You know, he's a gay man, and he's in this crazy. It's bizarre. The freaking movie. I only saw little clips of it, but I was disgusting. But anyway, so this new movie, the Spider-Verse, is did I get that name right, Khalil? The new one that came out, the new Spider-Man animated.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I tried to watch it, right? And then I'm talking about spirit taking us out of, you know, out of things that's not going to serve us, for those who are chosen, quote unquote. When I say chosen, the people who are doing the work, right? People who are trying to really elevate, you know, spiritually, mentally, physically. So I tried to watch it and I had a problem with it, right? With the visuals. So it was kind of like okay, so on these games, right, that the kids play, there's always a warning because of the lighting and the way and the way certain lights flash, right? People could get epileptic seizures, things like that, right? So I tried watching it, and by the way, I was trying to watch it with my younger son and Kyla. That they say, "Hey, let's watch a movie." Okay, bet, let's watch this because we're crazy about, you know, Spider-Man, Marvel, all of this and that stuff. We were excited. I couldn't finish watching it. It was bothering me. The visuals were really bothering me. I don't know what it was. I had to shut it off. Right? I didn't even finish watching it. So then it just stood in my spirit that same evening, you know, and I'm like, what the hell? And then the next day, and then I'm searching and I'm looking at it, and then I saw like a still picture of an advertisement for it. And I was like, wait a minute, these colors are this transgender flag colors, right? Because the transgender flag is these pinks and blues and stuff like that. The movie is written it, and then you hear
Ah, darn. She was on such a roll.
Yeah, she was. I was listening to her because she said really interesting stuff.
Ugh.
Yeah, it's funny that I don't watch
But
movies myself because I really don't have the attention to fully see a movie, only if it's about something that really
sorry guys.
me.
Sorry, I didn't kick myself out. A call came in. I'm on my phone, and that's what happens when a call comes in, it kicks me out.
yeah,
But anyway, so the next day I'm seeing like these posts of spirit confirming what I was feeling, but I just didn't know. I couldn't put my finger on it. And then I'm seeing like these posts come through an IG. Hey, there was a hidden transgender flag on the father's police uniform of one of the characters. Right. And I was like, wait a minute.
So that's
I
what they
was
do
like,
in movies.
it's yeah. And I was like, wait a minute. Did they just turn Spider-Man gay because he's in love with this one girl that's there? But I think that girl, from the way, if you see the signs, she's transgender because her father's the one that has the transgender flag on his uniform in support of transgenderism. And then there's other things in her room that if you don't pause the movie, you're gonna miss it. And I was like, wait a minute, they just turned Spider-Man gay and nobody saw it. But this is the attack. This is the attack with against the children, because this is all this is all tied in. It's all tied in with pornography. It's all tied in with brainwashing. It's all tied in with this whole government going in and trying to teach the children masturbation in class. And the books have been exposed. We're not talking about, they're not teaching these 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds masturbation between of a woman and a man. No, it's woman on woman, man on man having sex together. Right? So they're trying to get them young. So it's always an attack first with the children, and it's been like this for years, but people just want they can't handle the truth. They're like, they brush it to the side, and then but at the same time, this is all around the world, right? This is all around the world, and like higher echelons are so involved, with pedophilia, with pornography, and it runs. I feel it just runs this world and is horrible. So how can we battle against it? We could only really do what we need to do or must do to protect our children within our own circle, right?
Yeah.
Teach our children, instill those values, instill those morals with our children. And then the thing is that my children are, I'm trying to raise them, with some type of morals and ethics and things like that. And then they go to school and they're like, oh my gosh, mom, this, that, whatever. I'm like, no, you got to turn a blind eye to it, and then I teach them to protect themselves and stuff like that, and it's crazy. It's just so crazy. But, like I said, it's a lot. What can we do? But, you know, have these conversations, teach our children. And this is why I opened up the conversation with spirit, separating those and warning us of what's going on there, and having it manifest within ourselves first. Like, okay, I'm going to separate you from this. I'm going to separate you from that because this is not good. And this is, that, you know what I'm saying? So it's crazy. It's crazy. But thank you. Thank you for letting me chime in like that. And I really had to jump in because it's crazy. It really is. And we need to have these conversations.
Yeah, there's an attack on all fronts. Like at the same time, masculinity, healthy masculinity, is attacked as well. Like, just from the top of your head, how many male actors do you know that have played roles where they are a homosexual, or where they are wearing a dress, or like a tutu or whatever, very feminine kind of clothing. And unfortunately, this is even worse. A lot of the times, the actors who they will put in a dress are actors of color, are minority actors, because they don't have a big history of being degraded already. And yeah, Moonfeather, at the same time, what you said, like the transgender agenda is really being pushed, which is, but it's so double. Like I see a lot of memes about it, but it's true. They're asking us, the regular people, to accept them for who they are, but at the same time, they can't even accept themselves for who they are. Otherwise, they wouldn't have to go through all that hormone therapy and surgeries, which may or may not even be successful. So yeah, children are being attacked. Masculinity is being attacked. The atomic family, just the healthy atomic family, mom, dad, and cat, dog, 2 kids, white picket fence, that's all being attacked. It's all being broken up. And why especially they want the strong masculinity gone is because we are the protectors. We are the protectors of our kids. I have heard multiple fathers say that if someone hurts my child, I'm doing time, and that's the only occasion where I will be, doing time, being, behind bars. Because you
Oh
don't touch
yeah,
our kids
absolutely.
in any way. You don't touch them in any way, because for our kids, nothing's too crazy, nothing's too far. If it's for their protection, anything goes. But that's exactly,
Absolutely.
and I've even heard or seen comments from um, the people who are attracted to kids, that if they see a strong father figure with a child, they're keeping low. They're keeping away from it, because that child is protected, and they're not going to stand a chance, because they know that father will act, and he's going to get his face smashed in.
Ooh.
You bring up an interesting point as well. A lot of interesting points brought up. I mean, personally, I don't have a problem with transgender people wanting to be transgender, as I'm sure
Me
none of
neither,
you do.
because there are people who are really transgender.
Yeah,
Exactly.
sure. Like they're
I,
The
I
true
knew a friend.
percentage of transgenders is so little that it's barely noticeable. But if you do know someone who you grew up with that was very feminine as a boy, and you see them later on in life, hey, that you see them as a woman, and they had themselves changed, then everything falls into place.
yeah.
Same way it
I
is when it is when it's so with a woman that since childhood, who's always liked things that were typical boy stuff, and they didn't want to have anything to do with boy things
But it's so true. Like
or girl
you
things.
rarely saw it. Like I know from, let's say, the time I was born to the time I was, I don't know, let's say 20. I have known 2, and that's probably a lot, for the
Yeah,
Netherlands. I mean, Soraya can speak on that. Like, just knowing 2 transgenders in, well, not necessarily my immediate circle, but friend circle and all of that. That was special. That's a lot. And now it's
everywhere because it's been pushed.
Yeah. If you're a boy and you play with dolls, let's put you on hormone blockers. If you're a boy and I don't know, like put on your sister's dress because I don't know, shits and giggles. Let's put you on hormone blockers. If you're a girl and you play with cars or you play with dinosaurs instead of dolls and whatever, let's put you on hormone blockers. There's like immediately, it's the first thing people go to nowadays. Kids can't even experiment anymore. They can't even just put on something because it's fun, because it looks fun, because it looks funny. I don't know, like I'm just picturing my 5-year-old in his sister's dress. It looks funny as hell. It probably looked terrible on him, but like I'm not gonna question.
But that's going to the laugh if you put it on for a prank.
I mean, if he'd come walking downstairs wearing his sister's dress, I'd be like, "Oh God, Floyd, why are you wearing your sister's dress?" Well, because I wanted to wear it.
Look,
okay, fine.
I used to love wearing my wife's dress, to be honest. And I used to find wearing a dress like really cool, wearing skirts, especially in Rajasthan where it's hot. I didn't wear it out into public because I didn't want to freak people out, but I didn't really care. To me, it was just a piece of material to cover my balls with, excuse my French. But I think some interesting points were brought up. I'm very in tune with my masculinity.
TMI, bro.
Been attracted to a man. I've had a lot of gay friends in my life, and I've always gotten on well with gay people. Not so well with a gay woman for some reason. They've always given me funny vibes. But I've always had a lot of gay friends, and I've never had a problem with people wanting to be this way sexually or that way. Though I do agree that, and I'm going to use shamanism as a parallel here. There's this thing where shamanism is being turned into a fad. I don't know if you've noticed how popular shamanism is, and there's books on shamanism, and everybody wants to be a shaman, and everybody's interested, but most people aren't really very serious about it. They're not really. It's a fad, and I think
those are just riding on the hype.
Very few people that have a genuine transgender gene, and it's an actual genetic thing. So I knew a woman that her child was born with both male and female sexual parts able to produce babies, and she had to decide at birth which ones to keep. So sometimes it's so extreme that the certain percentage of children are born with both sexual parts. A certain percentage of children are born with a certain amount of hormones, but it's a very small percentage, and it does not tally with the way in which society is being driven towards transgenderism. And really, when we look at it, it's about money. Once again, there are a lot of these gender changing drugs cost a lot of money. Someone's got to pay for them. The government or some organizations have got to pay for them. It involves huge pharmaceutical corporations making huge amounts of money. There's industries growing on the side of it, operations, and I met a lady in the supermarket down the road who was transgender, and I had a long conversation with her about it. And she told me that her operation and all her drugs were paid for by, she didn't have to pay for a thing. And I was quite surprised because in South Africa, it's not really, a lot of people really need medical attention. It's not that easy to get cancer drugs for some people that are below the financial line, but it's very easy to get an operation for transgender and to be prioritized above someone who's got cancer, above someone who's got a fatal illness. You'll get your drugs more easily, you'll get your medical care more easily, and you'll be prioritized way over. And to me, that is like really a bit of a slur, because it just shows the agenda. And the agenda is basically to undermine men and undermine women. They are driving men to lose their testosterone, driving men to become effeminate, and pushing women to try and play the role of a male, so that there's this androgyny taking place in society. But were men and women supposed to be exactly the same? Or were they meant to be what they are? And is it okay for a man to be a man? No, it's not. If a man's a man, he gets ridiculed for being a man, right? It's not okay for boys to go and have a fight in the schoolyard anymore. But in our days, it wasn't a big deal. People would say, oh, naughty boys, you'd get punished, that'd be the end of it. Now if two boys get into a fight, it's a big story. They need medication. It's really about drugs. It's really about putting children on on Ritalin. Eleanor mentioned a really good point about how the state wants to take charge of our children. And I think this is just another one of the ploys that they have to get control of our children. And they've realized that this is a really
Yeah.
good ploy. Because if they can confuse the children to the point that the children don't know what sex they are, then they can be getting in there with counseling and guidance counseling, and they can be driving wedges between the children and their families, because a lot of families don't relate to it. Most normal people do not relate to it on the personal level. Like, do I want my child to be transgender? Damn no, I don't. You know why? I'll be honest about it. Not because I have anything against transgender, but I'd like to have a grandchild one day. And so I think a lot of parents feel that way. And I want him to be happy. If he feels to be transgender, that would be fine. Although he's such a little boy. Can't imagine him being transgender. He's such a little boy. It's just too much. I wish he would get a little more feminine sometimes. Do him a load of good. But I do think that we men are in tune with their feminine. Men are supposed to be in tune with their feminine, and men are being robbed of being allowed to express their feminine in normal and natural ways, but being forced to, almost many people are being forced into a sort of social corner of opening themselves up to transgender with these films. It does seem ridiculous that there's so much transgender being pushed in the films, because it's such a small part of the population. It's such a small part of society, but it's got such a big place on the silver screen. It doesn't tally up with the reality. And, as much as I can respect the rights of people that are transgender, and I think it's very important to respect people's rights, because free will is fundamental on the spiritual path.
Sure.
And what other people want to do is their business, and it would never be okay to attack someone or condemn them for their choices. Though at the same time, it's as if the rest of us aren't being given choices. We're being forced with this media onslaught of normalizing transgenderism, and it's not actually normal. The word normal doesn't mean acceptable. The word normal means it's the average. That's what the word normal actually means. So they're trying to make us think that the average person is transgender, which is not actually how society works. That's not it. It seems like it's a global population. They want to drop the world population, and if they can get a lot of people to turn transgender, that's a very fast way to drop the world population. I thought I'd put that out there as to chew on.
And Soraya can back me up on this. Here in the Netherlands, I believe it was this year, Miss Netherlands is from, like, Miss Netherlands 2023 is not born female. Miss Netherlands 2023 is born male, is a transgender. But it's so stunning and brave and woke, and we should applaud it. And then you look at who won the #2 spot, and you're like, but that one won? Like, sorry, no. Like, it's even come to that, pageantries where a born male, a born man now wins a female pageantry contest. And there is a lot of I hate to say this, but there's a lot of delusion going on within those groups as well, because many will, like, actually think themselves to be better women than actual women. I'm a prettier woman as a transgender than any natural woman will ever be. And it's like, have you looked in the mirror recently? You still have that caveman head and those man hands, and you're not a pretty woman. You're not a pretty girl. I'm sorry. You're a man with long hair in a dress. And totally botched makeup.
I agree with everything you say, aside from being sorry for what it is that you're saying. Because these are the kind of conversations that we have to have, and the things that we have to point out that are so obvious, because these males, I can't say men, these males who are so hurt and confused actually love their mother so much that they're trying to be their mother because of lack of a relationship or lack of a bond or lack of expression or whatever that healing actually was. You have males trying to imitate their mother. You have these transgender people, like you pointed out so brilliantly before, who cannot accept themselves, who want the world to accept them. Well, the world is never going to accept you because it never has. They'll give you that idea that, oh, society will accept you and the governments will back you, but that's not going to mean anything. None of that will mean smidgen until you have accepted yourself and you've dealt with your own pain, as opposed to trying to spread it to everyone else so that the good must suffer with the wicked. It's not going to work. We have been largely lied to and inverted against for decades now. If you look at the idea of theater, where any and all forms of acting come from, women were not allowed on stage in the same way that women were not allowed in the lodge or the temple or to speak in the synagogue or the masjid. This all comes and stems from the same place. So what does that mean? That means that when you look at Hollywood, you have a lot of actresses who have always been male, like Lucille Ball. Like the most current iteration here in the West would be Meg the Stallion. Mind you, the stallion is a male horse. They're telling you outright who these people are, but we choose to see them as they're presented, as opposed to who they truly are. They don't even teach anatomy anymore in schools because you would be able to recognize that, wait a minute, that's actually a man pretending to be a woman. So when you look at it through that lens, when you understand that we're also in the age of Aquarius, you have people your subconscious mind can never be lied to. Your subconscious mind always knows exactly what it's looking at, who's speaking, and what they are. But if your conscious mind does not recognize that this is the opposite, then now you have people who are completely confused and whose minds are literally at war with themselves. And that adds to this already age of confusion that we're in. We're switching from the age of believing, the age of Pisces, into the age of the knower, the age of Aquarius. So it's going to be, it has been, and I'm afraid to say it's going to be a little bit rougher, because these are the kinds of realizations, again, that we have to have, because the whole idea of a pageant has always been inverted. It's just that we're just now realizing it.
Yeah, I do remember, like, transgenders, like, they're literally taking on a different identity. They are presenting themselves as somebody completely different. And I know a lot of, like, former soldiers, ex-military, for example. I know of one in my semi immediate circle. It's like, not necessarily friend of my baby mama, but a friend of my baby mama's best friend, or whatever. Well, she, let's just say that, was in a horrible war. I believe she fought, like, back when she was a he. I believe she fought in the Bosnian war, like, when all that was going on, and she was so traumatized by it that she, it's kind of confusing, changed gender, changed their identity, just to distance themselves from, you know, the person who was in that war, who experienced all those traumatic events, who has probably done horrible things. So I can understand from a psychological perspective that it's, I want to say quick fix. I mean, it's not a quick fix, but it's a very permanent solution by literally becoming something else, something else. It's, yeah, okay. Someone else. It's a Freudian slip if I ever heard any. So I get it's a good fix for some people, and she technically is thriving, is doing well, because she was able to leave that old identity behind and kind of start anew. Like, she was reborn, like physically reborn, surgically reborn. So I do understand that for some people it is actually a solution. I do believe it's a thing. I do believe that, I mean, I'm not saying nature makes mistakes, but sometimes things get mixed up. It happens. I'm not gonna, you know, so yeah, I do believe it's real. I do believe it can be a real gene. I do believe it's a real gene. I do believe that for some people it is a solution. And yes, some people definitely thrive afterwards because they can finally be, for them at least, they can finally be their real selves. They can be themselves that they were meant to be right from the start. But what we're seeing now is just a push for degeneracy and for, indeed, you know, population control. And like, what better way of controlling the population than by, you know, making men into women, making women into men, and have everybody be infertile because, like, we have no functioning genitals anymore.
I love the heart, brother. And please tell me if my sound is not good. Is it all right?
Yeah, it's all right.
I've changed the setup. Changed the setup a couple of times. I've brought myself in. I had technical problems, but I fixed them on the way. And I totally agree that, you know, that there are actually conditions where nature can sometimes make an interesting situation. Like I, for example, have always been very in tune with my feminine side. And my whole life, I've had women asking me, "Are you gay?" Like literally, like my whole life. I used to have strange women come up to me on the dance floor and ask me if I was gay. And it would happen like 5, 10, 15, 20 times in a night. Like it was normal. And it didn't bother me because I was like, well, at least I'm in tune with my feminine, you know? And made me a better fighter, being in tune with my feminine. I could move better than other guys. So I saw it as a pathway towards masculine force, which it was for me. And so obviously, you know, men being in tune with their feminine is a wonderful thing, I think. And I obviously have a well-developed hypothalamus. So, okay, let's take a moment to look at the physical structure of the energy body. You've got the pineal gland. The pineal gland regulates the electrical impulses. It works with the thalamus gland. The thalamus gland is a hub that controls all the information moving between the spinal cortex and the various different directional interfaces in the cerebral cortex. It acts as a filter that recodes all of the information from all 5 senses other than smell. And I say all 5 senses because I'm including thought as a sense. Thought is a sense. If you think about it, it's a sense apparatus, only it's not pointing outwards like all the other ones, but it's a different kind of a hole that points inwards.
So we do essentially have 6 senses, and you can experience thought. So there's some kind of a sensory experience of thought. So you can call it a sense. And emotional complexes and mental complexes are all part of the same structure of experience, if you want to look at it from an objective perspective. So the cerebral cortex is basically controlled, and the nervous system and the impulses are controlled by the thalamus, which is related to the pineal gland, which is a little doingy sticking off of the thalamus. And then you've got the hypothalamus, which is regulating your moods, your desire for sex, your desire for food, your hunger, feeling full. Hypothalamus also makes you tired, makes you want to sleep, makes you go into the unconscious. We're talking about the sphere of the moon here. Obviously, the pituitary is a little doingle attached to the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus and the thalamus are on opposite sides of the center of the head, which is a keyhole, essentially. And so these two function as masculine and feminine within us. And for a man to be in tune with his emotions, he has to be activating the hypothalamus, because the hypothalamus is where it regulates the hormones in our bodies. It has a regulating effect on homeostasis, which is basically all of the rhythms of your body that maintain life. Regulates temperature, for example. So being in tune with your life force and being in tune with your chi is hypothalamus. So martial arts teaches a man to become engaged with his hypothalamus, with his ida from Vedic cosmology, if you want to speak in terms of yoga and Indian systems of development. And I use the word Indian loosely because it's Bharat. India was a name given by the British. But anyway, we'll overlook that. And so these two functions are a fundamental part of the brain. Now, it seems as if porn is attacking the hypothalamus gland, to bring it back to brass roots. So the hypothalamus gland is where you're going to feel this urge to be hungry. So if you attack the hypothalamus gland, you're going to stimulate your sexual urges. And also the thalamus gland is also what regulates your alertness and your awakeness. And melatonin works in conducive with this. So it also operates the sleep gates of REM. This is the thalamus gland with regards to the pineal gland. So the pineal and the pituitary are two parts of a functional emotional intelligence. Is the pituitary, what we call intellect, but intellect isn't quite what we think it is. Shall we say rational ability to consider things is the thalamic. And so you hear words like dilemma, right? Dilemma of magic. Take a look, get it out, take it out of the book. So it's about Hermes Trismegistus, and Hermetic magic, which is developing the thalamus and the pineal gland in order to become a control center, because it's the neurological control interface. So it's about directing mental force, where the hypothalamus is about the physical, the chi, as opposed to the shen, if you're using Chinese systems of cosmology and training and alchemy. So the porn is attacking the hypothalamus in some very profound way. It's affecting our emotional bodies, and it's causing our thalamus to become less active. And when a man is ejaculating, the hypothalamus becomes overactive, which is why if a man ejaculates too much, he'll become hyper emotional. You start acting like a drama queen. and because he's unable to maintain, you see, when a man's ejaculating a lot, his testosterone levels drop, obviously, right? It's used up. So testosterone levels raised in a masculine consciousness, in a masculine body, causes the thalamus to become more active. And this produces a state of calmness and alertness in a man. So if your reflexes are extremely fast, you've got a well-developed thalamus. Yeah, Hermes, think Mercury, the sphere of Mercury in the body, what it represents metaphysically, and so we're going to get an idea. So this attack on the hypothalamus, which is essentially sexual, also creates a doorway for appetite problems, because when you start using that gland, overusing that gland, you're going to open up other recessive subconscious impulses that are going to become actuated through the process. So there's a lot going on physiologically within the psyche and the body, as the body and the psyche are an extension of each other. When the porn is being watched, men are switching off their thalamus, switching on their hypothalamus. When you're visualizing within your head an image, which is a big part of the occult tradition, you are activating your hypothalamus. So the act of sexually fantasizing about someone is a hypothalamic activity, which means it kicks you into a sort of a dream state. And shamanism is very much about opening the hypothalamus, but in a transcendent form. And so the shaman actually moves away from imbalance, moves away from sexuality, moves away from these things as a norm, and keeps them under regulation of diet, regulation of food. Because when you eat too much, you activate your hypothalamus. Once again, why fasting is done? Because fasting activates the thalamus. You'll find if you don't eat for a long time, the blood increases the flow to your brain, to the pineal specifically, causing an increased sense of alertness, an increased sense of sensitivity. So there's a lot to be said about becoming unconscious because of porn, because it literally has this effect on the brain. And the unconscious is regulated by the hypothalamus in the way that the conscious is regulated by the thalamus. And the pineal and the pituitary are opposites to each other. Now, in a masculine body, the pituitary is seen as being destructive for the life force, which is why in India they'll speak about the Pingala being the life-giving force, and the Ida being the life-taking force. It's a very narrow-minded way of looking at it, but there is a certain aspect and element of truth in this consideration. So the way in which our hypothalamus is being programmed by porn, programmed by the media, and we're speaking about porn, we haven't really broached the topic and just how widespread this is in just common day advertising. We've taken it into films, and films is they want us all to become transgender. And when a man becomes transgender, he starts to deny his masculinity. And there's been so much push in the media for men to feel bad because we're evil, because we're men. Look at all the bad things men did in the world. Look at what the bad things men did to women. Men controlled women. Men pushed women down. Is that really true? Or did structures that were organizing society do that? Was it men that chose that women couldn't work? Or was it the corporations that gave them the jobs? And who made the laws for the corporations? And which governments decided the women couldn't vote? Was it men that decided that, or was it the government that decided that? So you've really got to look at the structure here. And yes, the men got to vote over it, but was there propaganda? Was there advertising? Was there the usual, like, people on a screen or on a podium telling you what to think and believe so that you can vote correctly for society? So there's been a lot of control as far as we can think, looking back. And I think this is just another extension of increasing the control over our actual brain by programming a man with and I believe that the pornography is more of a mental illness for men than it is for women, because I think a lot of women, they do it for men more often than not. Men are the ones that are suffering with this disease more often than not. And you can't generalize completely, because there are women that suffer with porn. But I think for men, it's more acute, because women tend to objectify sex in terms of emotion. Men are more about the bottom line. Men root their energy in the Muladhara chakra sense, the lowest base chakra. Women don't actually root their energy traditionally and normally in the Muladhara center. They root the sexual kundalini in the Svatisthana, which is the sacral plexus, the cup. So the cup is really fundamental to the woman, and the sacral plexus relates to the causal principle of Hermetics, if we want to think of in terms of cause and effect. Hence the cauldron is where you create a causal stew in order to create a change in reality, in terms of Wicca or any of the disciplines of magic that are out there. So there's definitely a magical attack happening on men, I would say, with what we've been talking about here. And porn seems to be a focus, the way sexuality is being broadcasted, and it really has a lot to do with forcing men to ejaculate and masturbate. And I think that is the problem. I think when men stop masturbating and ejaculating, like Stein very well pointed out, they will protect the woman in their lives. They will protect the children in their lives. And if all the men stood up and started protecting the women in their lives properly, started protecting the children in their lives properly, the governments or whichever organizations huge super corporations, they wouldn't have a leg to stand on, because the men would unite and they would say, enough. We want our children to be safe. We don't want our children to go to school and to be taught critical race theory, because it's not really productive. And so they're able to create structures within our minds, because we are masturbating so much, men. We're not conscious of what's happening. We're in a stupid daze looking at, oh, look at her, oh, look at her, oh, da, 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 oh, look at her, da, 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 you know, and we're not aware of what's being done in our name in the world. We're not paying conscious attention to the reality. And so we get lost in this and that. And so they hit us with transgender, they hit us with critical race theory, they hit us with this crazy political paradigm, and it's all just like bamboozlement. They want to confuse us, they want to daze us, they want to stupefy us, so that we can be overwhelmed and go, oh, this is a bit much, maybe I'll just watch some porn, you know. At least that's something that relaxes me. So they create the stress of society, the stress of money, the financial system being basically fingered from the wrong direction from all the big fingers of the huge super corporations, which own probably 70-80% of all the money on earth. We don't really have much of a financial vote at the end of the day, because the money is controlled by a very small group of people. And these same groups of people obviously have an agenda. And I think I've said enough for now. I'll let you guys ponder that and expand and bring up new ideas.
You're absolutely right. And with the whole, it goes a little into feminism and the waves of feminism, which you said as well, and you know, female liberty and sexual feminine female liberty and all, and they're pushing that to the extreme as well with OnlyFans, for example. You know, nowadays, like what you'll see a lot is that as soon as a girl turns 18, what's the first thing she does? Make an OnlyFans, because it's a way to make money, and it's liberating, because you control what you show, and you control what you post, and you control how much you charge for it. It's still about money, it's still about sex, but because they control it, it's somehow better, it's somehow liberating. And so like that's really the attack happening on the feminine. And like, just to make an actual living from OnlyFans is so incredibly hard, because there are, well, girls basically. I mean, when you're 18, you know, according to the law, you're a woman, but hell no, you're not a woman. You're just a, you know, a girl, big girl, I guess. Where was I? Oh yeah, lost my train of thought. But to like, there are so many girls who will like basically work full time on their OnlyFans for what, $50 a month, $100 a month. They're selling themselves. They're selling their body. They're selling their femininity. They're selling their sexuality for gas money. Or nowadays, probably not even. It'll get you down the street, and that's about it. But it's empowering somehow. I don't know why. It's still selling sex. It's still pornography. But I guess because it's in your own bedroom with your own equipment on your own OnlyFans, that makes it okay. That makes it not porn, because that makes it adult content, which is just a fancy way of saying porn.
I think you bring up some very, very good points, Stein. When it comes to OnlyFans, I look at OnlyFans as a bit of a beard for the porn industry. And what I mean by that is I think it's meant to be more of a fall guy so people don't focus on the porn industry. Um, when you look at
Uh,
OnlyFans, essentially, and I don't look at OnlyFans, but I have to come across it because I do have a Twitter, and Twitter is despicable. But primarily, you tend to see women, right? You tend to see females on their OnlyFans, and it's so interesting because I don't even understand how you would find someone's OnlyFans unless you knew they had one, right? It's so difficult to actually see what is actually available as opposed to the porn industry where you can just type somebody's name in, right? Or a company or what have you. And I say that because the women are, like you said, they're selling themselves for literally nothing. It's essentially fame because there's so much that goes along with that, right? Like much like many of us, will have multiple social media platforms. But that's essentially what it is, just like with benefits, right? You get to see and experience more. But what you really see is you see women, the women who have bought into this idea that porn is okay, that nudity everywhere is okay, essentially shilling themselves and thinking that they're better for it because they're not allowing the porn industry, to control them when it's actually that much more detrimental.
yeah, no, it is, and I love it, like a beard for the porn industry, and it basically is. It's I don't know, Pornhub light, you know, just but you will see a lot of um adult movie stars. They have an OnlyFans as well, but I guess it's just, for extra money or whatever. And I don't know. I'd say that I mean, at least those porn stars, like professional porn stars, whores, basically. But I mean, yeah, they're just whores, but high class, high status whores. I don't know. Um, like I know that at least they get tested. They have to get tested because it's like literally their livelihood. So if they have to be on like some kind of medication or just can't do it anymore, like it forms a risk for all the other actors as well. So I mean, it's literally the thinnest silver lining I can think of, if any, that at least they get tested there for STDs and other diseases which pose a risk for the industry as a whole. And if you have an OnlyFans and like you basically do the same thing, because there are girls, there are women who do the same thing, who will make a video with a fan, for example, and sell it on their website. They don't test themselves. They don't test themselves regularly, at least, because they're just, your average Jane. And not until something, kind of starts itching, kind of starts burning a little, or starts smelling funky a little, they'll get tested and then find out that, I don't know, like 3 Johns ago, that someone wasn't as clean as they said they were. So if anything, OnlyFans is even worse because there is no because there is nobody controlling it. There are no studios controlling it. There are no directors, script writers for. I don't know why you would want to write a script for that, but apparently there are storylines in it. Beats me. So yeah, it's even more degenerate. It's even more. It's the Wild West of the porn industry because everything goes and nobody is checked. Everything is left unchecked. But yeah, it's also a great way to pull in the focus there, so that people, like I always call it stage magic. They'll show you something in their right hand, so that you don't see what they're doing with their left hands. And Khalil, I think you make a good point that the porn industry and OnlyFans are kind of similar to that. If everyone's looking at OnlyFans and what's happening there, nobody's looking at the porn industry. They're still watching porn, but they're not digging any deeper into it, because why would they? They have OnlyFans, which are your average girl. It could literally be the girl next door, which is another one of those tropes.
And then there's the elephant in the room, which Carlyle touched on, but we haven't really tackled this elephant. The big one. That's why we're not tackling it. Children, pedophilia. Okay, so obviously it's getting younger and younger, and
Yeah.
it starts insidiously. I'll cite something that's been bugging me now for a couple of years, or a number of years actually. The last World Cup in South Africa. What was her name? Beyonce came to South Africa, got a whole lot of little girls. And what I mean little girls, I mean like 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, whatever, wearing high-heeled shoes, fishnet stockings. Eleanor, you might remember this. And had them dancing, doing the funky hip grinding sex dance in front of like stadium full of men. They were dressed to look much older than they were, with makeup to look like adult little women, dancing like in the most sexually disgraceful way to ever have children dancing dressed the way they were. And the South African public didn't take to it so well. There were outcries. There were people that were unhappy. There were complaints. It became a little bit of a media circus that had to be managed. It inspired me a little bit to think that there were enough South Africans that were offended by this, which was good. But it's getting worse, and that was years ago. And you turn on the television these days, and they are trying to sexualize the idea of a little child, trying to make little girls look adult and sexy. And there's something severely wrong with this, because on the one hand, you've got this happening. On the other hand, you've got this porn industry that's thriving, both as was pointed out, like officially and unofficially, and on all different angles. And so this porn industry has opened up the doors to pornography, to prostitution to become mainstream. Because porn's mainstream, well, prostitution's mainstream. Not a big deal. Where in the olden days, prostitution used to be more of a big deal. Prostitution's not so much of a big deal anymore. And so what this means is a lot of younger girls have been forced into prostitution. And they get forced into prostitution because they want to be porn stars. Because they see it as a way to becoming, we are using this word star way too much. You don't become a porn star. You become a porn item. Because the star,
you become a famous
to be a star, you're going to be a bright, shining light. Right?
Yeah.
And so when you call an actor a star or an actress a star, it's because they're damn good at what they do and they're acting. And there's a lot of work that goes into acting to make a film. There's a lot of skill. Those people work harder than anybody. Everybody thinks acting is cool. My ex-wife was an actress, and so I was connected to a lot of actors and actresses through her. And she went to E15 school. She was in the university when I met her. She was finishing off her E15 many years ago, acting degree. And so I got to know a lot of actors and actresses, and these people work hard. In university, they work harder than anybody else, to be fair. And in their lives, they've got to train in so many different ways. And so you can understand calling an actor or an actress a star, because they are literally doing something which is incredible. But what are these porn people doing for them to be called stars? They're not doing anything special. You know, they're laying on their back and they're screwing, which is like something that everybody can do. There's no skill set
Basically,
there. Anybody can do it.
yeah.
You know, and not anybody can do what Al Pacino does. You know, go into character in such a way that you think this guy's a mobster. This guy's a real mobster. He's not a mobster.
Yeah.
He's a normal bloke with a family. So there's this whole wow that's built up in like young girls' heads, and they think like, wow, I can be a porn star, or I can do this, or I can make money like this. And so they get pushed into prostitution. They ended up getting pimped by really dodgy gangsters. They get beaten up. They get put onto heroin and drugs because it's easier to control them when they're on drugs. So what happens is these girls meet somebody who's making a porn film. They put them in some C-rate, D-rate porn film, get them hooked on heroin, and then put them in a back room and rent them out for sex. And so the porn industry seems to be getting connected to the you know, the sex industry. And I think pedophilia is a big thing. It's been pushed into our minds in the same way that this nonsense with okay, remember that film about the hitman where there was a weird connection between an older man and a young girl? They didn't have sex, but there was this very much unspoken many years ago. When they were pushing this into us a long time ago.
I know, with a very young Natalie Portman, right? Yeah, I know which one you mean. Great movie, by the way. Great art house movie.
They
Great movie.
they
That was real
continue
acting. Those were stars.
they
But weird as
continue mind control later in V for Vendetta.
Yeah. Oh, that's such an occult movie. That's such an incredibly occult movie. But you see it with the Mouse Studios as well. The actor I was talking about for Deuce Bigelow is Rob Schneider. Dan Schneider is from Nickelodeon, who has a thing for feet, and especially with younger girls. He is known for a series like iCarly, for example, which was a very popular series on Nickelodeon, I believe. And he liked those young actresses, and he liked them a lot more than any grown man should. And he was very open about it. Well, I mean, I remember seeing like behind the scenes footage where I believe her name is Miranda Cosgrove, the lead star, and Dan Schneider is like really coming up to her and wants to give her a hug, and like just be close to her because I love you so much and whatever. And she's like quietly trying to sort of shuffle away from him because he's a grown man giving her the kind of attention that a young girl really shouldn't be getting from a man her age. So porn, Hollywood, entertainment, it's all entertainment. Some parts are just a little more disgusting than others, but it's all interwoven with each other. And you can see that there is Taken with Liam Neeson is a very good example of what you just talked about. It's basically exposing how it works. Drugged up, dressed up, like 10,000 for that girl, 20,000 for that girl, just to have and to do with as you please. Why? Because you literally have the money and the means and the power to do so and to get away with it. And there was this couple of years ago, the movie Cuties, Netflix, of course, Netflix. Same, like those actresses were, I believe, anywhere between 10 and 14 years old, very dancing, also very in a very sensual, sexual manner that, you know, no 10, 11, 12-year-old should be dancing. But we're expected to see that as normal, as empowering, you know, and especially with, you know, artists like Beyonce, because she is such a huge name. It's like, oh, it's such a great opportunity for those little girls to be dancing on stage for tens of thousands in the stadium. And oh dear, FBI, open up. uh, and you know, like millions watching at home. You know, it's such a great opportunity for those girls to be dancing with Beyonce. I mean, yeah, it is, because like not everybody gets to do that. But at the same time, if they are indeed dressed in those incredibly skimpy outfits and, you know, 7-inch heels and fishnets and whatever when being 10 years old, are we really supposed to be okay with it because it's Beyonce and she's such a big name in the industry, and because it's such a, you know, such a big deal for those girls to be dancing with someone like that? Like, it's because those people are so famous, and because they have made such big names for themselves, we let them get away with it. They become untouchable in a way for, like, for the average individual. If you're on the same level or higher, you know, or manager, record label, or whatever, you can touch her all you want. Like, quite literally, you can touch her all you want, anywhere you want. But like, for us, the plebeians, you know, she is way up there. She can't be touched. She can't be, you know, commented on in like any negative way. Yeah, those girls were dressed in skimpy outfits and whatever, but they got to dance with Beyonce. And it's like, yeah, okay. But how they're dressed and how they're dancing is not okay. Doesn't matter if it's Beyonce. Doesn't matter if it's anyone else. Doesn't matter if it's my, I don't know, my freaking mother doing it. It's not okay.
I completely agree. But even with that, we're still just talking about the surface. And what I mean is, you know, more than half of those girls in Cuties were actually little boys.
Oh
But,
God, yeah, of course.
but most people didn't actually follow up with the lawsuit that came out in the UK first, because I believe that was a French film. And then, of
Yeah.
course, it had to go to, you know, Netflix all over the world. But there were multiple lawsuits behind that movie, and rightly so. But you know, the majority of those little girls were actually boys, because that's how they tried to invert and cause further confusion. Now, I'm gonna have to get really real here, because we got to get underneath, because we're now, like Franklin said, we're talking about the babies, right? So the majority of these people, like Beyonce, like Rihanna, like Angela Bassett, anybody who is a quote unquote star, who has had in vitro or had a surrogate to carry their children, they're a man. They are a male. Beyonce is a play on boy once. Blue Ivy is a little
Oh
boy,
shit.
right? There's a lot, Jay-Z is supposed to be, this hardcore, wonderful New York MC, but he used to use I won't say the word. They call it a cigarette in Britain, right? That word. Like he used to be very vocal when it came to, homosexual and using derogatory slurs, right, for them. But then he comes out and says, "Oh, my mom's a lesbian," and now he's the biggest advocate for the LGBTQ, whatever, right? No offense to them, but I recognize an agenda when I see it. So Blue Ivy, his daughter, is actually a little boy. There's a very interesting promotion they just did where Blue Ivy is wearing this crown, but the crown isn't the queen's crown, it's the king's crown. Because they're telling you in your face what you're actually seeing, but we have to go beneath the surface. So understand that when we see these Beyoncés, when we see these Lady Gagas, when we see these Madonnas, these Lucille Balls, they're all men. And they tell you that they're men. Just look at their audience. They're all confused people, for lack of a better term. You know, um, I'm respectful to people's lives and their life path because I've
Yeah.
read enough people to know that some people's life is just some people's life, and no one can choose your life for you. So, we can call it confusion, we can call it whatever we want to, but it is what it is to a large degree. But we have to call it out for what it actually is, because people are hiding behind all sorts of beards when it comes to this. No offense to you, Franklin. I got a bit of a beard myself, just a little bit. I'm holding on to it with everything I got. But people are using false beards. They're using false masks
Yeah.
to push these different agendas in so many different realms that most people still are not privy to. We have so many inverted characters that we're shown, especially, and I don't recommend it, but especially when you look at things like Operation Mockingbird, when it comes to the news, whether it be BBC, whether it be American, whether it be Al Jazeera, the newscasters, I choose my title carefully, the newscasters are typically inverted. And this is also for a reason, because now who watches the news? Well, people our age, we don't really watch it, right? And people younger than us, they don't really watch it. So obviously it's for the older generation, right? Who are already under a large form of mind control. Hence why they're watching the news in the first place. Because they're the ones who control the largest amount of dollars and are the easiest to control because they watch that medium and trusted it. This is why false flags are so detrimental to the psyche, to the spirit of what we call a collective. And that plays right back to the primary root, which of course is the fruit of the tree, which is the children. So the easier
Yeah.
and sooner we can confuse all of you, all of you, from the youngest to the oldest, the easier it is to push this totalitarian tiptoe to a full sprint. And they're running right now. They're running, and we're literally passing them Gatorade and water, and we don't realize it.
I never even thought about it that way. I never really saw that connection, but it makes a lot of sense. The surrogate thing. Often you'll hear it's because, like, oh, they just, like, they want to keep touring, they want to keep making music, they want to keep that slim figure, or whatever, and the confused audiences, especially Lady Gaga, is such a big advocate for those groups, for those people. She promotes them in her music videos. She never um, never acknowledged, but also never like declined to answer on the question whether she is a hermaphrodite or not. She always gave a open answer to that. It's a question she'll get asked a lot in interviews, and she always has said things along the lines of, "Who knows?" or "Oh, if they say I am," like answers that are very telling, but not acknowledging nor denying it. But if you put those two together, the surrogate, the confused audience, holy shit, that makes a lot of sense. That, yeah. And
Well,
the
see,
newscaster thing, I have heard before. Yeah. But guys, I'm really, really sorry. This is gonna be it for me. I do want to spend a little time with my family. I've been so
Bless you, brother.
Franklin, thank you for hosting another one. Kalal, you came with some great insights again. I mean, when don't you? So I'm not gonna be on the one tomorrow because I'll be with my kids and my parents and my sister. But I do wish all of you a lot of fun tomorrow on the next roundtable. This has been a great one. A lot of good topics have been brought up, a lot of answers, a lot of things to ponder, even for me. And I thought I knew a lot already. Turns out I don't. So thank you all once again.
Enjoy the animals, brother. With your kids, they're gonna love it.
love, peace, and
I
power.
will.
There's
Family.
always something to learn, isn't it? Then
Sorry, come again?
I said there's always something to learn.
Oh,
Keep
yeah.
learning every day.
Oh, for sure. I guess the only thing that I know is that I don't know. So, but thank you all so much. I am very much looking forward to the next opportunity, to the next roundtable that I can actually be a part of. I'm going to enjoy the rest of the evening with my family. So thank you all, and until next time.
Good night.
Peace. Enjoy the family.
I will. Thank you. Peace out, guys.
Kalal, you were starting to say something, brother, and you didn't finish what you were saying.
I was just going to give a reference. Beyonce did a interview when she was pregnant with Blue Ivy, supposedly. The interview was with Oprah Winfrey, and Beyonce was wearing a red dress. You can find this on YouTube. Just watch when she first walks up, because she walks up. And I need people to understand the art of interviewing and the art of television and how and why they show you certain things the way they do. Because for anyone who watched Oprah on the Oprah show, which was, I guess it's been off the air officially for I don't know how many years, but my mother watched it. So I used to have to watch what she watched on occasion. Typically, when it comes to someone that's being interviewed, either they make a grand entrance or they're already sitting there, right? So when they show you a grand entrance, they're showing it to you so you can fall under a spell of glamour, and it's you're probably going to miss something very important. So when Beyonce walked up to sit down to be interviewed by Oprah, she was noticeably pregnant. I believe she was reported to be around 5, 6, maybe even 7 months pregnant. And when she sat down, her stomach collapsed because she was wearing a moon bump that, of course, would collapse, especially in the nature of the dress, kind of style of dress she was wearing. So that's a very obvious tactic to show you something. When she gave birth, pay attention to the number of the floor of the hotel she was reported to be on, and ask yourself why the entire floor was empty aside from her and her team that were delivering this child. There are always telltale signs. They have to tell you when it comes to media. They have to tell you what they're doing. But it's up to us to discern and to pay attention. And this is why decoding and these kinds of conversations are so important.
Welcome back, Soria. I'd love for you to add something to the conversation. I hope I'm not being on the spot.
Yeah, my internet was fell away, unfortunately. So I missed the part. I'll have to look that back, but it's okay. Yeah, and what Kalal said about that, you can indeed see. If you know where to look to, you see differences. What an actual practice looks like when something is being forged and faked.
And it seems like we've gotten to the point of reaching into the Luciferian conspiracy here. And we've got to go there, because no conversation about pornography and masturbation would be complete without the Luciferian conspiracy showing its head. There's a little bit of a play on words, showing its head. It's all about the head. And it's all about the head ruling without the heart. Yeah? And so the idea of masturbation is the head ruling without the heart. Take the heart out of the picture, let the head make the decisions. And that's sort of Luciferian summed up to a T. And what Kalal's pointing at is also very fundamentally important to understand how these backstage string pullers that manipulate the puppets of starhoodom, if we can put it in such terms, how they obviously have a particular story they're trying to tell us, and how they tell us this story symbolically. And anybody who can read the numbers or the symbology of what's happening is very clear. And there's definitely an entity element going on here. I mean, there's no way we can shy away from this conversation or as part of the conversation, because there's definitely an element of possession in Hollywood. We've seen it. We've witnessed it. The fact that drugs are so commonplace and people are losing their minds is sort of like a typical thing to consider. How many of our stars end up in psychological institutes to get treatment because they just can't cope? This mental illness is rife. And I believe a lot of this has got to do with the entities that people subject them to themselves to. And here's an interesting point. So when there's a woman on a film and she's naked and she's having sex, semen is powerful. It contains life essence. So when the man is ejaculating all over the woman, he's putting his thoughts all over her body. And his thoughts are quite dirty and wrong because his heart is quite closed to her. And he's not treating her like a woman, he's treating her like an object. Well, it's quite disgusting to think about it. But that's not all that's happening. There might be thousands, tens of thousands of other men masturbating and putting their ejaculation on psychological levels all over that woman. So what happens when a man masturbates and thinks about a woman? And he's got a picture of her, or he's looking at a video of her, and he's coming his little heart out at her image. What kind of a psychic connection does he make with her? And what is the bridge of this psychic connection? How does this psychic connection operate? How does this facilitate the spiritual union between him and the woman he's masturbating over as an object? And what kind of entities does this bring into the play? What kind of parasites psychic parasites does this attract? Now, we've heard our brother speaking about the sexual diseases, the sexually venereal diseases that are, STDs transmitted. I believe that the STDs are a physicalizing form of spiritual influence, and that the spiritual influences are happening on the inner planes. And when these men are masturbating over these women, he's opening himself up to something. Now, in the Hebrewic tradition, there's an old concept, and now this name has become mainstream, Lilly. And this name has been treated with a lot of respect in many occult circles. I find this interesting because when I first started practicing and studying the occult back in the 80s, that name was a very unfortuitous name, a name that many wouldn't even repeat out of fear of bringing that onto themselves. If you masturbate, you cannot say that name. Trust me. Trust me, you don't want to say that name if you don't. If you don't masturbate, then you can get away with it. And so, what are we talking about here? An entity, an aspect of consciousness, a disembodied consciousness that is able to siphon off men's sexual energy and utilize that energy in a magical way. Non-physical beings. I don't believe it's necessarily one being. I would consider it to be an order of beings, which is a part of the chain of life, a hierarchy, order of beings that relate to this consciousness that we can consider as this Lilith principle. And I think that there's very much, when the man's ejaculating, his negative energies are attracting the being, and he's shooting this being at the woman. And because she's opening herself up to all these men masturbating all over her on an emotional, mental level, because she's literally taking off her clothes to make other men get turned on, that's opening, that's a contract of sorts. How is this not Luciferian? How is this not opening a path to the dark forces? And when I speak in terms of Luciferian, I'm speaking essentially about, I'm not speaking in terms of a biblical sense as people would conventionally consider it. I'm speaking in terms of a broad spectrum of beings which are vampires of sorts, energetically, and basically are trying to find an outlet of survival because they've been left behind because of evolutional cycles that are moving forward and their evolution turned backwards. And this is a bigger story which we can't really get into here. I did do the creation of evil. It's on my podcast list. It's in season 1 of the, somewhere like halfway through the 108 videos, somewhere there. That basically explains the egregore, the 200 beings, how they took form, all of that, where demons come from, in terms of like the oldest scrolls that I could get my hands on. But there is a very interesting story to be discussed here with regards to these beings, in the way in which these seemingly innocuous acts of a man masturbating, what kind of a connection does he make with this woman, and how does that affect her soul? How does that affect his soul? How are they now connected? Because they're connected by this force of his ejaculation and the force of her desire to be desired and the force of her contracting to allow this and putting herself out there and opening herself up to this by taking off her clothes and opening her legs so that he can imagine that he's the man doing whatever that man on the screen is doing. There is something quite devious happening here, and I can only describe it as a form of magic. And these people that are watching this porn and masturbating, they don't realize that they are practicing magic. And they need to know this. They need to realize they're practicing magic unconsciously, because the act of magic is an influence to alter consciousness at will, utilizing the imagination and a ritualistic form of expression in order to shift one's awareness by shifting oneself into an imagined state, in order to bring this imagined state into fruition in reality, so that the reality can start to reflect the inner state that has been brought into being through the alchemy of change, which is the act of ejaculation, which changes the hormones in a very profound way. And the woman feels this man's ejaculation. She feels this energy, whether she's conscious of it, whether she's unconscious of it. On some level, she feels this energy. And this energy causes her ego to become structured according to the balance of the dynamic between herself and this man that she has contracted herself to. And when we think of Lucifer, in terms of loosely, we're talking about that aspect of ourselves which contracts, which creates contracts with with reality, contracts with each other. And I mean, contracts aren't all necessarily bad, but they generally are. They generally lead to a bad thing. I don't know. What do you think?
I have to completely agree. We're talking about high magic. For anyone who wants a reference to understand how bad some of this imagery can truly be, look to mythology speaking about the evil of cameras. Look how the indigenous would often run from cameras because they didn't want a piece of their soul to be taken away forever. Look to Islam and how they take the narrative of no graven image to the extreme with no pictures in the home. Notice how Prophet Muhammad has never been pictorialized, right? Driven or drawn or painted, right? Understand that porn is now readily available on any and every medium you can fathom. It is literally everywhere. From subliminal, there was a famous incident here in the States a few years ago with Lipton Brisk iced tea. And they did this art contest, and there was one bottle in particular for one particular flavor that had people having sex all over it. Look at these subliminals of Disney, whether it be the Lion King, when Simba fell off the cliff or fell on the cliff looking at the stars, and the dust that went to Rafiki actually spelled sex in cursive. Look at the current Little Mermaid live action film that came out earlier this year. Look at the original cover to the Little Mermaid and look at one particular golden tower, you know, that literally stood out, pun intended. Like, they show you this everywhere, and that's for the children, let alone what we, what the adults have access to. It is high magic indeed. There's absolutely no question.
Soraya, I'd love to ask you a question. Since you're the lady in the room, how does it make you feel, the thought of women subjecting themselves to the camera? What are your feelings? What kind of emotions does it evoke within yourself to think about how?
To look at. Because I see a woman who is degrading herself for be in front of a camera. It's kind of like it's kind of like being a prostitute in front of a camera. That's what it looks like.
Yeah, I mean, prostitution for me is something I have a challenge with, because I remember having women approach me in my life. If you're walking somewhere or you're going somewhere and the woman comes, no. And I remember how I used to feel sorry for them. Like a woman comes to talk to you and you don't realize, and you go, oh, no, 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 no. And you almost don't want to get too close to her, or don't want to touch her, or don't want to be anywhere near her, you know, like sort of recoil. And I remember feeling really sorry for these women, thinking like, shame, you know, is there really no other way for you? And I mean, it's a sad life. I had a friend that was a prostitute that had been gotten stuck into prostitution. When I was young, I met this woman who was, maybe she was only like a couple of years older, a few years older than me. And she had gotten sort of into cycles of prostitution. And I remember meeting her at clubs when I was like, you know, like 18 or something, 18, 19. And I remember feeling so sorry for her, and I really like cared for this woman. But I felt her pain so viscerally. And I suppose I was one of the few men that she could talk to about this, because obviously it was like hard for her. And people might judge her, and I didn't judge her for it, you know. And I was probably one of the only guys who didn't want to sleep with her, because she was very attractive, she was very sexy, she was a very beautiful woman. And I was always very, well, when I grew up, I was very, I didn't want to have sex with a lot of women. I'd rather just, you know, get to know a woman, and if I wasn't looking for that. So I didn't have sex with a lot of women in my life, but the ones that I had sex with, they got a proper dose. So it's about commitment. Men these days are weak. They don't want to commit. They don't want to be present. They want to go in and escape, get away. And I think I had a natural impulse, because of studying and practicing in a cult as a child. I was aware of what sexual energy was. By the time I was 18, I was very aware of sexual energy. I was scared of it. And I recognized this is a dangerous thing. And I think that these poor women do not realize what kind of occult forces they're opening themselves up to when they get involved in prostitution. I just don't think they have the slightest clue. And so a lot of them end up being sexually abused, physically abused, beaten, and end up being used by pimps, and end up addicted to drugs, and they end up dying young. Do you think that's a fair assessment? The average prostitutes?
To a large degree, I would have to agree. I worked in security. I worked in a lot of strip clubs for a lot of years, and I've known a lot of strippers. I've known a lot of prostitutes. I've known a lot of pimps, and it is a devastating way of life. And porn has taken that energy and tried to give it this glamour, like it's something to be glorified, when it's truly horrific. Whether it be the drugs, whether it be the lack of family, whether it be the outcasting of society. These people, mostly these women, these children, are running away from a pain, from a trauma that has never been addressed, let alone healed, and is spreading like wildfire in ways that, you know, collectively we do not fathom the depths. It is, you know, people are literally drowning. I see these, I hear some of these new female hip hop artists, forcibly, because I don't really listen to it. I'm very underground. I'm very old school. Um, but we collectively have more female hip hop artists today than we ever have before, and they all rap about the exact same thing, which is absolutely nothing but filth, and it's being glorified. And the funny thing about that is, not to make this a cultural thing, but just to show dynamics. When it comes to our young people, especially among the melanated, we're not even dealing with each other. So I have to look at these mediums of music and these narratives, and I have to ask a question because they're promoting them via our channels, but it's not us who are listening and buying it. It's not us who are literally fueling it, but it's us who are enacting the behavior it depicts. So there's so many agendas going on in the same dirty pool. I think for the average person, it gets to the point of, the root cause doesn't matter because it's going to be dirty regardless. And I think that is a defeatist mentality that has to be challenged and it has to be eradicated.
Beautifully put, brother. Beautifully put. I don't know if you wanted to suffix that. So I have.
What did it say?
I didn't know if you wanted to add to that. I'm just putting it out there if you want to.
I don't have something to add actually in that of this because everything that was said was already said. Really sad how Kabbalah has had to witness so many things that weren't okay in that world.
Yeah. So there's definitely this inversion happening, which is bringing us back to the conversation of the Luciferian situation. There's definitely an inversion here. Something's being sold as glamorous, but it's actually quite disgusting. It involves venereal diseases, possession, people growing old, getting weaker, men becoming senile and stupid, acting like idiots, becoming wankers, women losing their minds, going absolutely crazy, and children being sold into slavery and being sexually abused and being groomed by music and all of their icons into becoming perfect little prostitutes or perfect little cam girls or whatever in the future. And we can't call that music. There's no muse involved if we're going to be real. Muse involves philosophical expansion of consciousness, some kind of a philosophical ideology. And a lot of the hip hops and a lot of the rappers in the old times had something to say. And this, like, I think Lyle brings up a very good point that a lot of the rappers and a lot of these, they don't really have much to say anymore. They're talking nonsense about, like, come on, grind against my grinding bit, touch me where, touch me.
It doesn't have any depth anymore. If you look at how hip hop started, it really was about life. If you look at what it now is, it's exactly about what the sex industry is like. It's like a reference to.
And the sex industry, sex toys. I remember
sex industry,
when
like
sex toys were.
I wasn't necessarily talking about the toys, but about the prostitution, the the cam girls, the pornography. It's an entire industry because they are making tons of money of it. And it's driving people insane.
I was bringing up the toys because I remember when I was a child and there weren't sex toy shops anywhere. They didn't exist. And then I remember they had like one sex toy shop, and then they had two sex toy shops. And it was a very quiet place. Nobody would go there. And when we were teenagers, we'd go there for a laugh and see what kind of crazy things people are playing with. We just like can't believe this nonsense in these shops. And I think that was opening up the way back in the days, because that was before the internet existed, right? That was before there was an internet. Yeah. Cell phones didn't exist. There were no such things as cell phones. We didn't have any of this technology. Life was very different. But I remember when they
All
started
you had
pushing the
back
sex
then was an
shop.
analog telephone. Not even that. They came in like around early 90s. That's when the first cell phone came.
Exactly. They started, exactly. It all
And it
started
was
to coordinate.
analog phones, and it wasn't smartphones because they came after the 2000. So the time is really going fast from 1980 to now when it comes to technology, and then telephone technology.
And that brings up another good point. All of this has engendered the young culture to become Snapchat experts. And I always think when people say the word Snapchat, I always picture photographs of penises and vaginas. I don't know why, but when I think of the word Snapchat, I think of Snapchat. You know, Snap, I've got one too. Look, there's mine. And chatting about the pictures. So it's so common for a strange man and strange woman to send their sexual organ photographs to each other these days. And I mean, I've known a lot of women that have been really sorry for doing that. They've like cried their eyes out because like they don't know who they sent these pictures to. They don't know what happens to them, right? Thought they met a nice guy. It turns out, you know, he was a weirdo, and now he's got her photos. So people have become totally insane, and we've stopped really identifying as human beings. We've started identifying as flesh puppets with fleshy bits that can produce some little bit of like escapism from the flesh, which is quite ironic. People are trying to escape the flesh by going deeper into the flesh. So
Hilarious, actually. You really think of it like that.
yes, exactly. And that's what this whole industry is. People are trying to get away from their lives, which they're not happy about. They're not happy because they're single. They're not happy because they don't have a lover. They're not happy because they don't have meaningful relationships with people. Men aren't happy because they're objectifying women. They can't really relate to women. So they don't know how to be men anymore. Because they don't know how to be men, they start becoming more like women. The women don't know how to be treated like a real woman because they haven't met a real man. So the women are trying to fill the gap of the man. So they're trying to become the man that they wish they had in their life. The women thus lose their womanhood. The men lose their manhood. And we end up with this dynamic, which is now, as we've pointed out, being exploited by corporations that want to basically sell a lot of drugs that will change your sex. Because there's a lot of money in that for them. And obviously this then has got to do with operations, it's got to do with legislation, and obviously now, as Eleanor pointed out before, this gives the organized big brother an opportunity to get into people's children and start involving themselves. So the laws have now been changing. And in the UK, for example, your child goes to school and child gets spoken to by a guidance counselor that brainwashes your kid or says this to your child decides maybe sex change is a good idea. As a parent, you no longer have a say. There's something quite funny about that, you know, because like the word guardian used to mean something in the old days. And in the UK, for example, that's going out the window fast. So the parents are losing their guardian rights, and the schools guidance counselors are taking over, and the guidance counselors are basically, they're not even trained psychologists. They are trained in wokeism. They're trained in woke psychology. So it's becoming quite a dangerous place to bring up children these days. And I think of like Coca-Cola as being dangerous, right? I'm scared of my son drinking Coca-Cola. That like fills me with like dread. The thought of like he's gonna grow up soon, he's gonna drink a Coke. Damn it, what am I gonna do? Because he's never had one. He thinks Coca-Cola's for cleaning jewelry, you know, and thinks that's what it's good for. And he's obviously very healthy. He's very strong. And diet is another thing that's been under attack. And I think that because of the attack on the emotional side of our nature, this is the hypothalamus is being attacked. Now, the hypothalamus is related to the sense of smell in a sense. as we've pointed out, all the other 5 senses are filtered by the thalamus, but the hypothalamus directly routes the sense of smell, which is quite interesting. So it relates to food, and obviously food relates to sex, right? Because you smell, you get hungry. The smell of pheromones makes you get sexually hungry. The notion of hunger is quite similar to the notion of wanting to have sex. So there's a very big connection. So in a way, we can say that this is connected to the food situation that is happening on the planet now. And the way in which our food is under attack is also to dumb us down. So they're dumbing us down with sex, they're dumbing us down with pornography, they're dumbing us down with Snapchat habits of this and that. They're dumbing us down with the food that we're eating so that we'll be dumb enough to fall for the pornography and the advertising that are continually bombarding mostly men's minds with sexual notions. Women are being bombarded with, this is how you got to look. You got to look like that little porn queen. Otherwise, you're no good. No man would want you. If you can't behave like that little porn queen and look like her, then, you know, and you've got to learn to degrade yourself because men want women degraded. So women start getting these fixations in their head that they need to be degraded in order to be accepted by the opposite sex. And men obviously then become the degraders of the woman, because on the porn film, basically, I'm going to just say it as it is. What is it all about? It's like basically a lot of degrading is happening to these women, right? And in the end, okay, I mentioned in the beginning of the show, these Japanese porn actresses that end up in a circle of men masturbating all over them. If that's not the most degrading thing that could ever happen to a woman, and this is quite popular in Japan, and to the point where, you know, the actresses are drowning, literally drowning in semen. And this is also in the West, you know. A lot of these practices are really disgusting. And it's not something you would do to someone you love. I mean, if you're in love with a woman, right, you don't want to do that to her. You'd rather make her come again and again and again and again and again, rather than do that to her. You'd rather want her to, the whole point of a man making love to a woman that he loves is because he wants her to enjoy the experience, right? That has been lost. So the men are being selfish. Men are supposed to be, there's supposed to be a certain amount of service in the act of sex. The woman's supposed to be wanting the man to enjoy, and the man should be wanting the woman to enjoy, and so that the enjoyment together gets more and more and more and more and more and more. So this is lost. So women aren't even having real orgasms anymore. I think that's a very big problem in society. And I can tell you that a lot of my clients, a lot of ladies come to me, and I have very open conversations with them, and like orgasms are a bit of a rarity, which is quite sad, you know. So how do you feel about this? I mean, as a woman, I hope it's not too much of an open casket conversation.
Oh, no,
But what do you think?
I don't think it's something too much to ask. I mean, just it has become this way because the whole sacred part of what sex is supposed to be has been taken away. It has been dumbed down to something that just is for lust, nothing more.
And Kala, what are your thoughts on the whole idea behind women not having orgasms? And what do you think the occult effects are of that on society as a whole? Because it's obviously creating a societal change.
Well, I think it's absolutely horrible, first and foremost, because that energy is being misappropriated and it's not being cultivated. Real quick, just to speak on Snapchat. Snapchat was promoted as a children's app. You know, when it first came out. I've never had a Snapchat. I never will. But you know, I remember asking about it when it first came out and just completely being turned off because it didn't make any sense. Why would I want an app where pictures and videos and whatever you sent disappeared? You know what I mean? Like it didn't even register with me. And then I got it years later because that's how you see. I could never understand when it came to child pornography, you know, how people, not so much how they got found out, but how they even operated, right? Because surely servers and browsers and there had to be certain algorithms and things in place to find when certain images were sent, promoted. No, that's not the case at all because the quote unquote system is implicit in its flow. So, you know, those Snapchat pictures do not disappear. Whether it's Facebook, whether it's the Instagram DM, all forms of messaging, essentially the mainstream social media platforms have an option where you can just slide up because we've all done it by accident at this point. You can slide up and make any chat disappear once someone has seen it. Well, that came directly from Snapchat. And that's how a lot of these images are procured. Now, to the question of a woman's orgasm, I have to go back to when I was doing a lot of sexual study when I was 18 to 19 to 20. After I had stillborn daughters. One of the things I found out was women tend to be more aroused when they have their cycle, right? When they have their menstrual, the menses. When I realized that, I was amazed because naturally, just me as a person, and I was only 18, you know, at the time. But I had lost children, so I was trying to understand and also avoid that pain again, right? So realizing that I had always been naturally drawn to my partner when they had that, when they had their cycle, um, made me very, very curious. And then looking at culture here in the West in general, across all borders, all genders, all races, that was largely shunned. You know, that's disgusting. They can work magic on you and all these kinds of things. When nature itself tells you that this is the time you need to be a man, right? Or at least be comforting, if not necessarily physical. That has completely brought us to where we are now because it's about the man getting theirs, that instant gratification as opposed to pleasing. This is why Tantra is so important because the woman, her focus is important. You want to be operating on the same planes of existence, so to speak. But it's more so for the man, matching her frequency, matching her rhythm, and pleasing her, which allows her to heal any trauma that she may have had or may be experiencing, as well as you to elevate yourself and to literally exist on multiple planes of existence. That is being squandered literally on the ground. I think it's absolutely deplorable. If we can't please, there's an old adage that says, happy wife, happy life, right? And I think they're doing everything they can to destroy that narrative. So if the majority of women in the world are not being pleased, they're not being catered to, they're not being listened to at the very least, then the current state of the world makes that much more sense. And I think it's very sad.
What you say is so on point, brother. I couldn't even begin to put it into better contextual verbs or words. And it really is fundamental, like more fundamental than anything that I could begin to say to you. Is what you bring up is truly heart-wrenching, you know. And about the menstrual thing, it is, I think, because women aren't being fulfilled in the way that they need to be fulfilled emotionally, that they feel sexually aroused during those times. I don't think it's normal and natural for a woman to feel that aroused during that time, because her biology is dictating otherwise. Her biology is dictating that she should be feeling aroused between day 12 and day 16, right? So day 12 and day 16, those are the golden days. Like myself and my ex-wife, we didn't use contraception. Myself and my ex-girlfriend, we didn't use contraception. And we had wild sexual, like lots of, never had babies. Because it's actually quite easy to avoid having a baby if you're a man. You just count her days, keep track of where she is in her cycle, and fulfill her during the times that she needs to be fulfilled. She won't even be thinking about sex during a period. If you get too close to her, she'll be, oh, I'm coming on tomorrow, don't forget, And she shouldn't be feeling the desire to need that. You should be giving a woman so much of your love and so much of your heart, and she should feel so safe in your presence that she doesn't need that. I think women desire that man comfort when they don't feel safe. And it has a lot to do with insecurity that the woman is feeling because of the man. If the man was playing his role properly, the woman would be feeling so secure throughout her entire menstrual cycle that she would know that this man's got her. But women know that when they become like sexual with a man, that the man's going to come close to them and keep them warm and safe. And so women don't have that sense of security anymore, sadly. And I think it's got a lot to do with, pornography has really hit the ball out of the park.
True indeed. Especially when you compound that with the fact of when we are oppressed, when we are under stress, the children go through puberty much earlier and much faster. And that's on top of the chemicals that are being placed in the air, in the food, in the water, in the chemicals in the clothing, even. All of that is being compounded, and the pressure of that fear currently is breeding and breaking far more pipes than it is creating precious gems. And we are all collectively feeling the burden of that.
Absolutely. Amen. Amen to that. There's definitely, I think, as men, we've become cowards in general, most of us. Yeah. And I'm going to bring up the point of abortion. Because I think that because of pornography being so wild and mainstream, and because of Snapchat being what it is, because of television advertising sex is just like normal. But having babies isn't normal. So basically, this is what I'm getting. The powers that be want us to be having sex all the time. But we mustn't be in love, and we must be having sex with random people. but we must not be having babies. But abortions are fine. That's the message that I'm getting from society's constructors, the string pullers. Sorry to laugh, but it's disgusting, but it is what it is. And so a lot of abortions happen not because the woman wants to have the abortion, in my experience, and it's not always the case, but it's happening because men are such cowards, because men don't have the balls to step up to the plate. They'll put a baby in a woman's womb and say, whoops, you know what, I'm going to run. And in this financial circus of a world that we live in these days, bringing up a baby is no joke, you know. And if a woman's going to be like playing the role of having a womb and having to like bring this being into being, how is she supposed to work and generate money and do that all if there's no guy there who's got her back? Like, at least for the first 2 or 3 years, a woman shouldn't really have to work. She should have a guy that's got her back. And after that, they can sort of start figuring out how to share the load, you would think. But that's not how things are playing out. And so the old model of old-fashioned, you know, a man looking after a woman, there was a reason for this. And we've lost this in a sense because men have in my opinion, wussed out. They don't want to take responsibility. And I've known so many guys over my life, over the years, that have been potential fathers and they've like opted to have abortions. And I've really felt for these guys and I've seen how it's hurt them. And I've watched them suffer silently with the knowledge that they weren't man enough because they were scared, because they were young and it was a big responsibility and it's 18 years, 20 years of your life, it's a commitment. And like, all I can say is respect to all those women out there that did it. Respect to you that became single moms. Respect, so much respect. When the guys were wussy and they flaked out and they were like bendable little, expendable little whatevers. And so it's a tough world to be a woman in these days. I'll leave it at that. And I don't think it's fair from my.
I gotta totally agree with you. I was raised by a single mother. My father was killed when I was very, very early on. I didn't notice a lot of lack because my grandfather never had any sons. So when I came along, I was like his favorite. So he poured everything he had into me, and I didn't realize I didn't really have a father per se. But the women who take on essentially both roles will always have my deepest gratitude and respect. I wish more of us men, males, boys, stepped up to the plate. But until we continuously have conversations like this, until we hold each other to a certain standard, until we get back to a more universal idea of your children are mine, that's going to be a very hard road to walk, but walk it we will.
And men have become good at pointing fingers, I've noticed, particularly. So many guys I've known have blamed the woman, like, oh, well, you know, she didn't want to have a baby. So like I'm the macho guy. Instead of like taking on like, yeah, well, she knew that you didn't have her back, mate. She knew that you didn't have the courage to stand through it. And once that baby's born, her instinct as a mother is going to force her to do what has to be done, and her life will be drained out in the process while you go running off screwing other little girls. So that's giving me a frog in my throat. It's making me emotional, I suppose. Thinking about how many friends I've known, people that have suffered because of this, how many children suffered. And in China, they make stem cell milkshakes for $200. Is that what the West is going to become like?
That's a very, very interesting point. I've been for the last maybe 2 weeks on all, and I mean every last one. If anybody else has experienced this, please message me anywhere. But for the last 2 weeks, to answer your question, Franklin, on all of my social media platforms, when I scroll, and I don't really scroll very often, you know, I tend to go to people's pages. When I scroll, I see ads for everything China. I've seen 15 to 20 different ramen noodle ads, and all kinds of Chinese clothing, which is something you didn't really see before this. You know, if something was owned by China and promoted here in the West, they typically wouldn't let you know right up front. You know, you had to look at the tag or you had to read the credits or things of that nature. Now they're putting it right in your face, which I think is very telling. We're literally getting it from every end. I think China has a lot to do with that, especially here in the West, being that we supposedly, I don't speak French, but we supposedly have so much debt attached to them. When you look at some of these porn companies, you'll notice that if they're not outright owned by Chinese firms, then their largest stockholders are. So that's, you know, I think a lot of that speaks for itself.
And we don't want to knock China, but that one-child policy is really what the world is about. The world is about dropping our population. That's really what the world is about. We've been told that there are too many of us and that we're having too big an impact on the world, when actually it's the World Economic Forum that has turned our exports into a circus brigade, basically allowed super corporations to go into African states and stop them from growing, stop them from being self-sufficient, force them to grow sugar cane, which then gets replaced for sugar beet, which then gets replaced for some other corporate's fake sugar, basically collapsing their economies and stopping their natural farming. And this has been done country by country by country by country. And the entire system has been rigged, where IMF packages are given to countries in order for them to start growing particular types of foods so that they can become exporters rather than producing their own foods. I've seen this happen in South Africa. I've seen this happen in so many other countries where I've been. And it's all about really promoting the GMO, right, which is food that can be controlled. So it seems like this is definitely connected to what's going on the other levels, because it does basically, the World Economic Forum wants people in other countries to own things in other countries, right? So if you go to China and you look at where a lot of the money that's coming into China from is coming from Arab states, right? So, and if you look at the Arab states, there's a lot of ownership in America, and a lot of America has a lot of ownership in the Arab states, in the oil, Gulf countries. So there's this, we put our finger in your pie, you put your finger in their pie, they'll put their finger in our pie, our finger goes in that pie, that finger's in this pie, this pie. It's a way of lacking accountability, and it's a way of producing a system of control so that the people in their own country don't have the control. The control is coming from outside in. And some World Economic Forum can sort of manipulate the system in order to basically change the structure of trade, change the structure of life in the world. So I think that we do need to look at the financial policies on Earth and the World Economic Forum to understand what is going on subtly when we look at pornography, when we look at how widespread this is, how much money there is in this and how this has changed our lifestyle. And I do think there's a connection. I do think that one can't just shy over it and go, oh, this is conspiracy theory, because it might seem to be, and there might be some chunks of conspiracy theory in there, but there is definitely something going on with the World Economic Forum. And the fact that they want so much money and exports to be the basic route of all economic exchange these days with regards to food and other resources, we've got to start considering that sex has become a resource. And so it is the domain of the World Economic Forum because it's all about money. And there is so much money in sex. And advertising is basically the way in which sex has really been utilized. And advertising is actually a massive industry if you think about it. How much money moves through advertising and how much of that is relating to sex. So how involved is the World Economic Forum in these little subtle programs? And it wouldn't be like a direct involvement, obviously. It would be a subtle involvement because of countries and contracts, what is allowed and what isn't allowed. Possibly that's why it's legal in all these countries, because trade standards are being created by these psychopaths. Is it right to call them psychopaths? That are somewhere else, sitting in a tax haven, probably, controlling the world like it's like a puppet show, and got us all basically trying to figure out what's going on, while the value of food is being pushed sky high because most food has to travel around the world half or twice before it gets to someone's plate. Even though you could have really produced the food locally, it doesn't work like that. You've got to export your potatoes to them, and they've got to export their carrots to them. Who's going to send peaches to you? And because it was decided a long time ago that it's not good for you to grow peaches. It's not financially beneficial for you. Stop growing peaches. Stop growing this. Stop growing that. And it does seem to be pointing us into a financial situation where a lot of people are stuck having to go into porn. So it's almost like because of the World Economic Forum and because of the price of food and because of the price of inflation and because of the way things are structured, porn is now becoming a viable reality. Because so many people have to turn to porn to make a livelihood. And when we talk about porn, we talk about all those websites with cam girls and prostitution and advertising and modeling. And I don't think we can look at modeling as being that far apart, because it's really selling sexiness. And it might not be overtly porn, but it's a very subversive form of porn, if you want to look at it, because they're going to find pretty girls to make people buy stuff, which is manipulating, once again, the hypothalamus in the man. And continual manipulation of the man's hypothalamus means his testosterone levels drop. And a man with low testosterone levels is not a man at all.
You muted yourself, Franklin.
Thank you, Carlisle. I feel really silly. I don't know if you guys have much more you want to say. I'd love to hear from you guys, and then we can wrap it up after some time when everybody's expressed themselves. Because I noticed we've been running for 4 hours and 14 minutes. I didn't expect this conversation to go so long, but my gosh, it has. And I think it's, we've touched on a lot of interesting points. But what is it that we haven't covered? Or what is that needs to be said?
I just wanted to add on, I'm in full agreement. I wanted to add on to what you were saying about China, because on the other side of that, I want people to look at what Mother Nature does. The one-child policy was enacted when I was born in 1980, and they scrapped it in 2016 for the two-child policy, right? But that did not allow for a upshoot in births. So now, I believe it was 2021, they're allowing families to have up to 3 children, trying to promote marriage between a man and a woman. And nature is punishing them by not allowing them to reproduce. So, you know, I want people to see, you know, because if this is what China is pushing on the world, because see, China doesn't allow for certain marketing. They don't allow for a lot of this LGBT, you know, you never hear about them in China. There's a reason for that, because they've kicked them out, but they're still promoted to the rest of the world. Mind you, when we are oppressed, we reproduce and mature more and faster. So I just wanted to point out how nature works in a pressure cooker, because that's essentially what we're dealing with. And I want to say thank you for the space. It has been an absolutely wonderful conversation and much needed. I look forward to the next.
And Soraya, do you have anything you want to add? Well, I will.
Not really. Just wanted to say that it was a lovely conversation.
And thank you both. Thank you, Kalal. It has been an amazing discussion. And thank you, Soraya. Sorry if you can hear what's it do? Oh, yeah, dogs. It has been an amazing conversation, and we'll definitely have to kick this ball out again. We'll find the sequel to this topic where it seems to be leading to seemingly the Luciferian side of stories. And tomorrow we're going to be discussing alchemy. And just to tie this off, alchemy is very much related to the energies of sex, if you want to look at it on a subjective level. So in a sense, this pornography is a form of forced alchemy. When we touched on this, you know, the magic that's people are being pushed into magic and they don't know it. So tomorrow we're going to be discussing alchemy, and it sort of almost picks up from where we've left off on a sense, because they will be taking a look at how, and that will be tomorrow from 5 to 7 p.m. UK time. That'll be from 12 to 2 New York time, and 6 to 8 South African time. And we say it's going to go on for 2 hours. We always say it's going to go on for 2 hours, don't we? We'll see how that works for us. But yeah, so tomorrow we'll be discussing alchemy, which I think is going to be an exciting topic as well. But it does sort of connect and tie in to what's going on here, because alchemy is essentially creating the shift in consciousness and shift in society, and sex is being used to alchemically change society, alchemically change individuals, alchemically change our breeding patterns, alchemically change whether or not we can breed, which Carlyle points out beautifully in the way of adaptation. And I bet like MSG and food additives and GMO food has got something to do with it. And soy, oh my gosh, don't even get me started on soy. Any of you out there that eat soy, don't. If you're a man and you eat soy, it will destroy your testosterone levels. If you're a woman and you eat soy, it will put so many xenoestrogens into your body that you will become bloated with xenoestrogens. And that in itself will probably cause you not to be able to have babies. Or it causes that other, what's that illness in the womb called, that a lot of women suffer from. Xenoestrogens are one of the most toxic things for men and women. So I think that might have a role added to the Chinese situation of them changing the child policy, because, well, men aren't men anymore. Yeah, probably a big part of it. But thank you guys. Thank you all. I'll have my last word said and say thank you, Carlisle. Thank you, Soraya. Anything else you guys want to add? This would be the last moment. Thank you all that have been in the chat. Thank you, Vega. Thank you, Eleanor. And big bless to everybody. It's been a lovely conversation. It's been a bit difficult, but it's been great. I'll leave it with you guys. Kalal and Soraya.
Love, peace, and power to you, Soraya. Love, peace, and power to Vega and everybody in the chat. Libra Lamb, Moon Feather, thank you for coming. and we will see you next time.
There I go, my mic off again. So much love to everybody. Big bless. Om Shanti. Thank you, Kalal. And thank you, Soraya. And I will have to thank Moonfeather. She's not here at the moment, but she is working. She's busy. She's trying to multitask, which is something that she's quite good at. I'm not very good at it. Big bless to everybody. Om Shanti.
Peace.